We'll go ahead and get started here, guys. Welcome this evening. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. This is the Planning Commission for the Village of Morton. First order of duty is roll call.
Guile.
Here.
Knepp.
Here.
Smock.
Here.
Ritterbusch.
Here.
Farrell.
Here.
Zobrist.
Here.
Keach. Keach.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Fick.
Here.
DeWeese.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next item this evening is the approval of minutes. Our last meeting was May 26, 2020. The agenda packet was included. If there are no changes or omissions, do we have a motion to approve minutes for regular meeting May 26, 2020? If there are changes, please present them now.
Motion made to approve.
I'll second. This is Kara.
All in favor of voice roll, say aye.
Hey, Brad.
Aye.
Aye.
Brad,
All
we
opposed?
need to roll call everything. They passed a legislative change in the last week that requires roll call on all Zoom meetings.
Okay, thank you. Farrell.
Thanks, Pat. Yes.
Keach.
Yes.
Knepp.
Yes.
Fick.
Yes.
Ritterbusch.
Yes.
Smock.
Yes.
Guile.
Yes.
DeWeese.
Yes.
Zobrist.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, now we're going to head into the public hearing portion of the meeting. Prior to this, I'd like our council to provide a brief statement to the public.
Thank you. Tonight, there is our public hearings being held pursuant to published notice. Any person wishing to make a comment to the Plan Commission will be afforded an opportunity to do so and will give their testimony under oath or affirmation. I will administer the oath or affirmation. Any person living within 250 feet of the property at issue who wishes to cross-examine a testifying witness will be afforded the opportunity to do so upon recognition by our chair on matters germane to the issue before the Plan Commission. No member of the public should address a commission or cross-examine the applicant until recognized by the chair. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make a recommendation to the village board. The Plan Commission makes recommendations only. The village board is responsible for taking final action on these matters. In addition to those which are my normal Plan Commission announcements, there are a couple additional announcements which are appropriate since we're conducting the meeting by video conference. If anyone is having trouble hearing the meeting, please send a message to our Zoom administrator, or you can also email me. My email is pmcgrath@mcgrathpc.com. It is vital that all who desire to participate be afforded the opportunity to do so. And if technological issues are preventing someone from participating, we will work to resolve those issues before we proceed. Participants are asked to mute their microphone while they're not speaking in order to help reduce background noise. Individuals should speak one at a time and not over each other in order to improve audibility. While we ordinarily have the deliberation by the Plan Commission immediately following the public hearing portion of the case, I've recommended to the chair of the meeting and would suggest he proceed potentially in a slightly different order, where we conduct all of the public hearings, close the public hearing period, and then the board can do its deliberation. That will allow a slightly more convenient arrangement where our meeting administrator can mute all of the non-board member participants so that the board discussion is limited to only the board members. Since that discussion is to occur after the public hearing, it would be prudent and appropriate to do that. So if Your Honor would proceed in that fashion as I've recommended, then what we would do is mute all public microphones from the administrator's side once the public comment period is concluded. And then after microphones are muted, except for the board, we would have our board deliberation in action. With that, I would indicate, Your Honor, I've completed those announcements, which I would intend for this evening's meeting, other than to remind the public that our normal rules of procedure provide that the presenter offers their testimony first. After the presenter has offered their testimony, we will open the floor up to public comment. You can indicate that you want to be heard by raising your hand, which is a function you can do through the Zoom meeting. If you click on the participants label, it'll open up a window and you can click raise hand, or you can unmute your own microphone when I ask if anybody wants to present comment, and that would be your way of telling me you desire to be recognized. But please wait to be recognized to speak before you do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGrath. I think, so just so the table is aware, that means we are going to go through all three of these case numbers this evening. We are going to let the public speak on each one. And then afterwards, we will close out that public hearing portion. And then the table, it will be our opportunity then to talk with the petitioner and amongst ourselves, ask any additional questions, and then we will vote. So it's a little slightly out of order. Anyhow, I appreciate everybody working through this. Obviously, these are kind of crazy times with the Zoom meetings. So on to the public hearing portion. First case we have before us this evening, 20-20ZA. This is subject property located at Lot 1 in the Village of Morton. The short legal is Section 29 T25 North, R3 West. And this is a petition filed by Leroy Linwood Jr. and Steve Lehman. They're requesting a zoning change from R2 to R4. This was in our packet, and it shows the aerial as well as the projected development. Is there someone from the public? Petitioner, Steve, are you here today to talk about this? And if so, can you please swear in with Mr. McGrath?
Is that unmuted? Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Steve, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Steve Lehman,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All right, if you could just provide the public and this table a brief overview. I do have the narrative that you included in the packet, which I think pretty clearly states. If you want to go ahead and just give the elevator pitch on what's going on here.
Yeah, so Justin, do you have any graphics to put on the screen, or should we just use what we have?
I think I don't have access to that. That would be through the administrator. So if you want to put up what you have so that we can see it, that's great. Otherwise, Brad, we would need to coordinate to make sure that the public can see what's being discussed.
Yeah, I think we're good. I mean, it's on file there, but we can go ahead and share our screen to give you a visual, and I'll just give you an overview of description.
Great.
Okay, so what we have here is we have an image here of the Kingwood property, and it's it used to be the Village of Morton's property for a treatment plant. Since then, it has changed hands to We Care Inc., and it's not been utilized ever since the demolition of the treatment plant. So we've just identified that property as having a lot more potential than what it's been used for in the past. It's been sitting there vacant for quite some time, and it's got some complexities with it that make it difficult for someone to invest, or currently it's zoned for someone to put a home or residence on that property. I think it's very unlikely that somebody will get a home loan for their personal loan or their personal house and be able to put a home on that property, utilizing it, especially considering its past experience as being a treatment facility for the Village of Morton. It's on the edge of town. It's surrounded by some high density, and we think, and we've seen that there's, from personal experience, there's been a lot of demand for our product that we're able to put together that would provide for some upscale housing for people who want to live in Morton in our community. And this is a property that could be repurposed and brought to life again. So I see a lot of benefits to doing that. So our goal is then to change it to an R4, which it is neighboring R4 currently. It seems like it would be a very good fit for something like that. It's also at the edge of town, closer to the power lines, and there's that creek there too that's part of the Village of Morton property. So really right now, this is being, the boundary for this property is R4, and it's basically unutilized ground and a canal. So we think that this is the highest and best use of property for the Village of Morton and for its citizens. And so we're asking for a zoning change so that we can improve it.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I will now open the floor up to individuals from the public who would like to ask questions of Steve. What we, as Pat mentioned earlier, what you need to do is, if possible, either unmute your microphone, which will be an indication to our administration that you would like to speak. Preferably, you would go into the participants drawdown menu and select raise hand, and then we will call you out. You will state your name and residence, and then go ahead and ask the question. Again, we ask that we follow these procedures simply so we can all keep track and make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. So with that in mind, do we have anyone who would like to question Mr. Lehman?
And can I supplement there, Justin? In addition
Please.
to cross-examination, this is also the time for the public. If you have a statement or a position to take on this case, this is your time to provide testimony to the Plan Commission.
Thank you, Pat.
And Your Honor, I believe I see one individual who's, at least one individual who's unmuted a microphone. But Kelly Pinter is the name. There may be others, but that's the first I see. So
yeah, I'm struggling to see them all. Kelly, if you are in fact raising your hand, so to speak, will you go ahead and state your name and address?
Apologize, I didn't mean to do that.
Okay, my screen's froze up in front of me here. Can everybody hear me?
Thank you, Kelly. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak here regarding this?
There's a Pat Kloffenstein with his hand raised and an Ariane Taft.
Yeah, I would like to speak.
Both have their hands.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Pat, go ahead if you would, state your name and your address, and we'll let you make a statement or cross-examination.
Pat Kloffenstein, 352 East Idlewood.
Hey, Pat, before you get going, if you're going to provide testimony, I have to swear you in. Are you intending to provide a comment? Testimony, Plan Commission. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Pat Kloffenstein.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Maybe just a quick question on this one. In layman's terms, is this a property on Queenwood Avenue? I couldn't tell by the...
Yeah, so it's an odd property for sure. So the property does come up to Queenwood Avenue. However, its access point is actually going to be coming off, it's an East Queenwood Road street address, but the access is going to be from South 2nd Avenue.
South 2nd. Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
I'd like to speak. How do you speak?
Hey, Mary, I think we see you. Go ahead and state your name and your address, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Okay, great. My name is Dr. Mary Kay Rudolph. My address in Morton is 2100 South 2nd Street.
Hey, Mary, I'm going to swear you in before you get going further. In case you provide testimony, could you raise your right hand and repeat after me, please?
Sure.
I state your name.
I, Dr. Mary Kay Rudolph.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do affirm. Do solemnly swear or affirm. Yes.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions. it seems somewhat disingenuous to me that the picture we saw was only a drawing of the completed project, but it doesn't show the location. It is on Queenswood, that is the address. The egress, because for whatever reason, they're not allowed to go in and out off of Queenswood, comes over next to my condos. And it's not a vacant lot, and it's very much living space. And right across from me are all single family homes and duplexes, many children. And so I'm really concerned that this feels to me like it's kind of sliding in there. I heard that they had tried to get this in place. Several had tried to purchase the property, but were told they could not have a driveway onto Queenswood. And so that these folks are purchasing that property and kind of sneaking the driveway in right next to the condos. It's going to have a big impact on families and children and community neighborhoods and traffic and air pollution and all kinds of stuff. And I'm very concerned that this is just now being discussed and we're not seeing any pictures of the actual neighborhood as it really looks. We're seeing just the drawing of the mocked up completed project. So, and it's 3 stories, which nothing else is 3 stories. So those are a few of my concerns, and I'd like to hear some background about how this project came up, why they chose this spot, and why it has to be 3 stories, and why can't it go on to Queenswood if that's where it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the interest and the comments, and glad to speak to that. And we do have other images as well that are part of the package, and part we can share it on the screen right here. It shows that once again, we don't have an entrance off of Queenwood. We are keeping the traffic to a minimum and matching up with what's already there. And you can see on this drawing, and do we have that image? We have it. Yeah. It's okay, as you can see on that right there. Yeah, we'll pull up how it is, an aerial of existing, and then also a drawing of what our proposed layout would be. And you'll see the similarities, kind of the overlay, how things match up. But yeah, our plan is not to come off of Queenwood, of course. We're just coming in from the side on 2nd Street, which is already an entrance that's cut in right there for the neighboring properties. This plat shows that an entrance was obviously intended long term. It's probably where the entrance was, I assume, for the treatment plant when it was there. So this is really not a change in the entry location at all. We're not asking for that. We're actually just saying repurposing the property rather than just being abandoned from being a treatment plant. But we can actually make some nice upscale homes for families to live there. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Steve, do you see that that is a big, substantial difference? That is not an abandoned area where there are no people. You've got homes around it. And I don't understand, again, if your address is Queenswood, why are you not exiting and incoming off of Queenswood instead of on a side street? If you look down at the bottom left, you'll see our condos. There's even more traffic across the street, another apartment complex being built at the end of that street. So again, it is not an abandoned area. It's a beautiful, kind of bucolic, quiet area. It's getting more traffic right now from another complex at the far south end of South 2nd. And now you're looking at how many units you're talking about are going to be using that driveway right next to that house, where that's a neighborhood. That's where children are playing in the street. So I'm very concerned you're not taking this seriously when I'm asking these questions. Why not Queenswood? Why would you have it on South 2nd?
So I'm going to just step in real quick. This is Justin Farrell. One of the things I want to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to speak, and I understand that there's some emotion in these things because these are people's homes. So I completely understand that. But I also want to point out that with regards to ingress and egress on sites, oftentimes a developer is not able to put access points where they want it. In many cases, those things are either arbitrated by the Illinois Department of Transportation, or there are other reasons, specifically safety, why those ingress patterns and those things are set forth. In this particular case, and Brad and potentially even Craig Laudermilk down the road could speak to this, but this access point is already existing, meaning this was always supposed to be the place where someone entered into this development. Even in its current zoning, this could build up and be a lot more, there could be more activity. I do understand that the change to an R4 adds additional density, which you spoke to with regard to the size and how many units. And Steve, you'll have to let us know how many units can come in there. But I also would say that, some of these things they just aren't necessarily up to the control of the developer. And in some cases, those access points end up being the reason why we're looking at this as opposed to, say, a single family home or an R2 residential. It may be cost prohibitive for someone to develop here because you're coming in off the Second Avenue. But so I just wanted to step in and make sure that we're aware he may not be in control of everything. Steve, I think the question on density of this property, as far as how many units you were looking to put in, is still on the table.
Yes. Okay, so it is about 2.29 acres. So I'm not going to R4 would allow for way more than what we need. We're not planning to maximize the density. We're actually going to go less than half of what, probably less than half of what you could do. So yeah, we're aware and considerate of the setting and the appropriate size. We're looking at 2-story building that's just in the footprint that you see, which doesn't even take up not even 20% of the site or so. It's really, and we've got that up towards the Queenwood street there, so there's a nice streetscape. But then the access point is on the second and fourth. So it's, in talking with Craig Laudermilk and people at the village, that's the most logical location for access in and out without disruption.
So I didn't hear any numbers. So what's the maximum amount? And just because you say we have no plans to do what the maximum is, you could if the zoning changes. So what is that number? How many units are you planning on putting in? How many cars will be added to travel? I know you have to look those numbers up and do that when you're doing your planning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it would, we think it's adding to between 18 to 24 as the maximum. Yeah, R4 zoning gives the impression that you could put 39 on there. There's no reason we would want to or need to. I don't think it fits well for the setting. So that's why we scale it way down to just be appropriate for that property.
Dr. Rudolph, did you have any other questions for the petitioner?
I'm going to let some other people ask questions. I don't feel like I'm getting really good answers. Maybe I'm not asking questions well enough. So I'm going to let other people who are there, it seems like maybe they have some comments or questions. Maybe they'll help clarify. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I would like to speak if I could.
Please go ahead and give your name, address, and then if you plan to provide testimony, you'll swear in with Mr. McGrath.
Sure. Yeah, I do plan on that.
Go ahead and when ready.
Okay, my name is Greg Amstutz, and I have lived on the corner of Queenwood and 2nd since 1984. I'm the single family home that's basically right across the street from this projected project. So I'm going to probably be one of the most affected.
Hey, Greg, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So wanted to get your name and address on record, then I'll swear you in, then you can continue. I apologize.
Oh, okay, sure.
You could raise your right hand and repeat
Sure.
after me. I state your name.
I, Greg Amstutz,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
I do solemnly swear
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Anyway, I'd like to say that living here for the past 36 years, we've seen a lot of development and a lot of changes and good changes. For instance, Brookside Estates, that's basically right behind me a little bit. I, of course, got the little bit cemetery first and then Brookside Estates. Nicely done with mostly duplex townhouses. There's a few 4-plex and 3-plex and then a 6-plex at the entrance, but fits in real nice to our neighborhood. The upgrade to Queenwood was a very good addition. And then even going through the process with WeCare, I was building my family room addition at that time. So just to give a little, if I just thought I'd give this information out, there's a road that you're talking about. They actually put that in the base. They gave me about 4 tandem 32-ton topsoil from where that drive is on Second between 1900 and then the other ones that they recently built. So they put, I believe there's CA6 or some sort of base. They had road equipment in there, and they put everything but blacktop, and it was ready to go to be blacktop. I don't know what happened that they got dirt back over top of that, but I actually got all the tops because they didn't, they came over and asked me if I wanted the topsoil. So that worked out real well. So I just thought I would just point that out, that there is a base there, and WeCare was originally going to put in some sort of an activity center. So I haven't heard anything more on the development of that property until now. But my major concern that my wife and I have is the height of this. I received a rendering, Steve, Mr. Lehman, from Brad, and it was showing that you originally were looking at a 3-story, and that was going to be a huge issue for us. I know I have some tall bushes in the back of my lot, but we like our privacy, and we feel that being, you know, townhouses behind us, and then even beside us, they're just 2-story townhouses, and they're all, you know, the type of homes that people are going to own. And so I kind of pointed this out in an email I sent to all the commission members, but I understand the development is going to happen, but when you're talking R4, my concern would be your picture you're showing now is 2-story. Huge difference than if you decide to go 3-story. Much more abrupt. That's going to be much more on the other side of the R4 spectrum. It's, you know, one thing to have R3, or excuse me, R4 with like three unit townhouses, maybe like in a court circle like they did off of Robin and back in there. And so that's my biggest concern is because we have put up, you know, a lot of changes since I first, you know, we first bought our property back in 1984, and we've, you know, had to adapt to all the changes. So I'm concerned. And the other question I have, you know, just now looking at the picture you've shown me, I'm just wondering, why is it possible that those units could slide a little more to the east? Because I know my neighbors across the road in 1900 are going to feel the same way, that these units are kind of close to their property. Is there room to push them a little more east where the, you know, vacant land is, where the creek, and you got, you know, quite a bit of grassy area there before the creek. And then on the other side, there's, you know, again, open air space. They're not getting toward any lines by going to the east. I understand, you know, if you go back to the south, you're going more toward the power line. But that was one thought I had just now looking at it. So I'm sorry if I'm a little wordy here, but we're planning on staying here through our retirement, and we put a lot of investment in our home. So I'm going to be quite affected by what you built, and I would, you know, kind of appreciate if you give me some comments on maybe like moving a little to the east. And can you guarantee, like Mary was saying, how do we know that if the R4 is granted, one, if you would back out of it and not follow through with the land, now the land's changed, that could be a problem. So they may not come in with as nice of apartments and more of an apartment look. So those are the kind of concerns we have. Or, you know, if we guarantee what you're showing us is what is going to happen, that's one thing. But, you know, we're not sure.
Gary, I'm going to jump in here real quick. This is Justin Farrell. So you're correct. Once the zoning change is made, under the premise of R4, not planned residential development, but R4, that's it. It's the zoning is it. So you're exactly correct. Once that is given, there is no guarantee against the future that someone might not change it. You know, those are things that, you know, we have to take into consideration. Now, another thing I want to mention, and this is just in response to you, and Steve, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to Gary as well, but for the rest of the public, just understand this evening, because this is a zoning meeting and this is not the final meeting, right? This is a recommendation only. Most of the questions that you guys are presenting tonight should be like this. They should be about what your concerns are. Make sure you get those questions asked. But as far as answers from this table, do know that the zoning itself does not have any, it doesn't indicate where something needs to be located on the site. That would go through site plan review. And the final version of that, Gary, will probably be decided, I assume, you know, later on down the road when they would do site surveying and they would understand where the water detention would go. Typically at this early stage, what we see is a practical rendition of what they expect. But I'm sure there's some little changes that could take place. Steve, do you have anything you'd like to add for this?
Yeah, I really appreciate those questions and comments 100%. And they're all valid, they're all important. And that's the kind of feedback I think comes from a healthy community and a healthy dialogue. So thrilled for that. And I would like to meet with you and discuss locations and all that. I've been meeting with Craig Laudermilk at the city, the village, and Jamie Bullard, and we've been planning out the site, location of the building, the storm detention area. All that feedback I can get from you to get your preferences. It weighs into what we do. So I appreciate that, and I want to talk some more about it with you so it accommodates where you live. The other part you had mentioned as far as bringing it down from 3 stories to 2. And that's why you'll see something different. We've listened to the feedback from the public. We appreciate it, and have taken that into account. And that's part of why we brought it down from what could be a 3 down to a 2. So we're committed to stick with that on this particular project, like you've requested. And we can also do a limitation of 10 units per floor, 2 floors. If there was to be some special stipulations on this rezoning that said that, we're 100% fine with that part, just to show that we're sticking behind what we say, and your feedback has been important. So, and I think you've got some more background and wisdom to share with us on this topic. So, as well as placement of the buildings, that we have to come up with an initial. I hope most people understand the process is that we have to come up with an initial plan for the zoning meeting for discussions like this, but these are a work in progress. So if there's some advantage bringing it back further away from Queenwood, we're so open to that. If there's some advantage of taking it closer to the creek, open to that. That's a coordination with the site plan review with Craig Laudermilk and Jamie Bullard and Brad Marks and the whole group. So we do appreciate the public input. If that's answers the questions, great. If there's more, keep bringing them.
No, and that's the height. Honestly, the height is my most major concern, and accepting a more of an apartment look versus townhouses. That's something that I'm a little disappointed in that development of that property. I was always hoping it would be like a court with townhouses maybe circled around or something. But is there a way that there would be a commitment or some sort of that you would stick to what you're saying, though, that we won't be surprised by a different development, because honestly, I'm wanting to ask the board to deny it, but if it sounds like you're working in a way that scale them back like that and they could fit in a little better, I think it's something we could live with. But.
Yeah, 100%. We're 100% comfortable saying that we would invite stipulations on it that said it can only be 2 stories, it can only be 10 units per floor, maxed out at 20 units. We're 100% fine with that if that can be done here.
You're talking total of how many units then for the whole property?
Yeah, that's
20. It sounds like now 18 to 24 is what he mentioned before. It looks like we're landing on 20 now at 10 per unit or 10 per floor.
Which is, the R4 zoning could give you 39. We're saying we're committing to basically almost half of that to accommodate, and what you said is it's valuable feedback.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like I hope I don't butcher too many of these names, but is it Arian Taft? It looks like you have been unmuted for a while. Would you like to speak?
Sure, that'd be great. So I'm Arian Taft, and I live at 2008 South 2nd.
Me administer your oath. Thank you for pausing for me to do that. You can raise your right hand for me and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Arian Taft.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Well, as you can see, I live basically where the plan is to put in a driveway, and I am aware that there has always been an opening there. I think it needs to be noted that there are 3 of us as families that live along that area right in front of the driveway proposed. All 3 of us have children. There's even some at the very end of our condo unit that has older children that attend the high school. There's plenty of traffic down South 2nd as it is right now. It will only increase with the other Prairie Creek apartments that are being put in down on, I believe it's Yorty. So that's my biggest concern is the traffic. Again, we have 3 families who have young kids who ride their bikes, play out in the yard, do kid things. Do you know what kind of traffic that is going to create along that area there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just looking at I understand the neighborhood very well. I've built quite a few of the homes on those streets, and I love that area. I think it's great. I've got friends that live there as well and still own at least one house right now. I really haven't heard any complaints about the traffic. It seems like it's towards the end of town, close to a dead-end road. I think in comparison to most places to live, it's pretty minimal. But yeah, I'm aware of the traffic is always something to look at. I also look at the circulation, though. If somebody who lives on this property would almost never be going by your home if you're south of the property. I don't see any reason why they would hardly ever go south from there. They would almost every time would be going north out to Queenwood. So I don't see the traffic going by your house being impacted.
Well, there's a highway that's out that south end. So many people will take that highway if they live or work in Lincoln, Bloomington, Pekin. So if any of those residents that you have living in that apartment complex happen to work in any of those areas, they're going to take that highway exit, which typically you take South 2nd down to Yorty and then out.
I mean, the percentage would be minimal. You're talking about a very small percentage that would live here and choose to be working south and take that route to the interstate. And it's going to be a negligible amount of traffic, in my opinion. That's a guess.
Okay. Do you plan on doing any type of landscaping along that driveway there to block any noise that maybe, I mean, that's pretty darn close to my front door.
Yeah, well, there would be landscaping. That right now, that entry area is, I would have to look at it again, but I think it was around 40 feet wide. So if we have a drive that's about 20 or so, then there should be space to plant some shrubs on each side of it. But you would not have a direct view of the parking lot or of the homes very easily from that angle.
Okay, and there is some landscaping that we currently have as the Prairie Creek townhomes, but it wouldn't completely block that area. Do you plan on, and I know your apartment complex is over on South Missouri, many of us have driven by them just to see what to expect to be basically out my front window here, but do you plan on putting up any lighting?
Well, on the lighting is a sensitive issue. We try to have well-lit areas for safety. But we also don't want that light spilling out to bother neighbors. So we try to really focus on down lighting and just keeping it right there on our property.
So you have no plans for pole lighting is basically what you're saying?
We do not currently have plans for pole lighting, but we are open. That's part of the feedback part. We're open to suggestions, and we would look at it with our engineer. We'll have a civil engineer and electrical engineer. And so that's part of the next step is to design it more thoroughly.
Sure, and I'm completely for safety, 100%. However, at the same time, if it's impeding upon my living area and my living space.
Exactly.
So if your contractor or electrician can work with you on that.
Yeah, 100%.
One other thing, and again, maybe this is something that will that I need to address at a different time, because I am the Prairie Creek Townhome Homeowner Association president. So there have been people who have contacted me specifically about this issue, but we just had our townhomes power washed this last year. We don't do that every year. Obviously, the construction that's going to come up from you building these is going to create more dust, more dirt. Is that something you're willing to compensate us on?
I mean, I'm just digesting that thought right now. So
Let me step in on this. This is Justin Farrell. I absolutely appreciate where you're coming from, and I wish I could say the same thing to everyone who just built a church near my home. But I would say that tonight we probably need to keep this as much focused on community impact and zoning, so that we don't get tied into the weeds. Steve, if I'm overstating this, please correct me. But I would say you're relatively easy to get in touch with, and I would suggest you guys meet off-site to discuss some of those types of questions, specifically, you know, if you're negotiating maybe some deals like that, because I get what you're saying, and that's between the developer and you guys. But for this meeting, I'd like to try to keep as much of this on focus as we can.
So I have some more questions, if at all possible.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Because again, I'm speaking for quite a few people that live basically in my condo. Do you have plans for any kind of outdoor storage?
we do not currently have plans for outdoor storage. I know there's some storage units that are just not too far away from there on the other side of the power lines that we would direct people to if they wanted that.
Okay. All right. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Is there anyone else who I've missed? There's a lot of screens to scroll through. I'm going to give 15 seconds here for public. If someone wants to speak, please raise your hand in the screen or go ahead and just let out a peep. Okay, looks like we can move on to the next petition number. Pat, under this sort of abbreviated state, Mr. McGrath, do I need to do anything other than just move on to the next public hearing?
No, sir, I think you can just move on to the next public hearing.
Off we go. Case number 20-3ZA, subject property is a 17.33 acre over in the Village of Morton. This is filed by the Village of Morton. This property is over currently school property off the interstate. They're requesting a zoning change from B3 to I2. I believe the petitioner this evening is going to be actually Craig Loudermilk from the Village of Morton. If that's true, Craig, can you go ahead and swear in?
Yes, that is the case.
Craig, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Craig Loudermilk,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly affirm
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Go ahead and give us your brief summation, if you will, for the public.
Yep. So I'm obviously representing the Village of Morton as the petitioner here. Like you said, this is a 17.33 acre parcel that is subject to the rezoning request. This is PIN number 0606-16-200-017. Brad, I think it might be good now if you could share the map on your screen that we discussed to illustrate the location of the property. Okay, we got two, there's two pictures here. Yeah, that's perfect. So as you can see on here, you've got I-74 to the south, and then Harding Road goes off of Main Street there, and it's in between basically Harding Road, the interstate, and it's surrounded in blue on your screen. This property is currently zoned B3. A majority of the surrounding property is zoned I2, including a majority of the Main Street Business Park, which lies north and west of the property. Again, I'm representing the Village of Morton as a petitioner, and this rezoning request is contingent upon the transfer of the property to the Village of Morton. Due to the I2 zoning in the immediate vicinity of the tract, we believe the proposed zoning amendment is necessary to allow similar use of this parcel consistent with adjoining owners and will have no adverse effects on the public welfare nor the property of other persons located in the vicinity thereof. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Craig. All right, in the public, do we have any questions for the petitioner? If so, please unmute or raise your hand.
There's a Lawson Snell with his hand raised.
Great. Lawson, if you can, please go ahead and unmute your microphone, and we will, you can swear in if you have a testimony, or If you wish to cross-examine, just state your name and address.
Actually, that was for the last issue that you guys just had. I think I got missed. So, I don't know what you want me to do.
So this is for the previous request?
Right.
I'll tell you what, why don't we put you on hold and we'll come back to you after we've dealt with this one, but before we move on to the next.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right, you bet. Okay, any questions this evening from the public regarding case number 20-03ZA regarding the 17.33 acre parcel with a request for zoning change from B3 to I2, petitioned by the Village of Morton? All right, hearing none. Going once, going twice. Okay, Lawson Snell, would you like, we'll come back to you. Thank you, Craig. I think that's it for you. We're gonna move on to the next case number, and then we'll obviously stick around for the table in case there's any questions there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Lawson Snell, what questions did you have for petitioner Steve Lehman regarding case number 20-02? Lawson, you're still, it looks like you're still muted. All right, we're going to move on. So now we're moving to case number 2004ZA. This is the 33.88 acre parcel with a current zoning of R1 and R4. The request on the original petition was to make that all R4. Our petitioner this evening is Steve Lehman. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, the petition that originated this from R1, R4 to R4 has been downgraded a bit now to what we would consider a planned residential development with some changes to it. Go ahead and when you're prepared, speak to that. Mr. McGrath, does Steve need to swear in again, or can he still continue forward?
He remains under oath from the oath I previously administered.
Terrific. Steve, go ahead and let us know what this is about.
Absolutely. Yeah, on this one we had quite a bit of feedback and input for the last week or more, and I just want to say I appreciate it. I actually really appreciate the constructive, respectful feedback, and it has played into what we've come up with. Just like we had a little bit on Queenwood right here, and through the last week, we've done a scale down, made some adjustments, listening to what the public says and their concerns. So we've applied that to this as well, and we've also done the open house at our office for Friday and all day today, and some public forums and meetings. So we've really gathered a lot of feedback from the public and the neighbors, and appreciate that. I appreciate everyone's interest. It's in a good part of Morton, which all Morton's good, but we value what it is for the community as a whole, and so we've put that information into our overall plan. So, and I've got a kind of a slide deck to go through. I'll try not to make it extra long, but just so that everybody has accurate information. Yeah, the original request was simply as an R4 from what is currently as an R1 and R4. But our intent the whole time was to have some single family and keep some R4 in the back as it is. It's more of an adjustment or a modification of location and positions. So I want to just give an overview. Are we sharing our screen right now? Okay. So this is just an overall, just a view of the concept. So this plot is 33.8 acres total. The R1 is existing as 28.35 acres, and the R4 is existing at 5.53 acres. We're not trying to change the total size of the zoning areas or the total density of the entire project. What we're trying to do is try to find a better way to position each of these buildings so that it's good for the neighbors and it's good for the community. And of course, the feasibility of the project has to make sense for it to happen.
Steve,
So,
if you were trying to share something on the screen, I just wanted to make you aware it did not pop up.
okay, I think we're getting close here. I mean, it's the same information. Can you see that, Justin?
Yes, now we're here. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll flip through this so everybody can understand just some background on Ethos. We've been in business as a group for a long time. I'll make this quick, but I've been doing construction management, development, and design work like this for my whole career of 20 years, all of which I've been based in Morton. So we're not new to Morton. Our family lives here. We've lived here for over a decade. Our kids go to the schools. We appreciate Morton as a community, the school district, the parks, everything about it. And we have identified a property that we think could have has a lot of potential. And right now it's a bean field. And I think that a lot of people have looked at developing it and improving the property and had struggles with it because the R1 zoning and restrictions that are required with that, as well as the infrastructure that it takes to get all of that, the city streets and curbs and the water and sewer and all that. The infrastructure of developing that was pretty significant. I think that has been a large part of why it hasn't transformed to something of more value. And as we take a look at this, we've come up with a plan that still keeps single family for the vast majority of the property. We're keeping the same acreage, single family, but taking that R4 higher density multifamily that's currently on the back line and giving it some shape so it's more interesting. That way it's not just a bunch of boxes on the back side of the lot, but instead we give it some interest and curve and soften it up, which I think is good for neighbors. I think it's good for the property. I think to get perspective on all of that, we have to look at how it is currently zoned. And right now, as you can see on the screen here, it's currently zoned R1 for the top portion and R4 for the south portion. We're not, and if we just build as is, as is currently allowed, or if us or any other builder who comes in and wants to build as is currently allowable, they would be putting in some density, some multifamily on that back line there, and pretty much in a straight row, as you can see in that rendering. So that's an example of what could be done now. If the zoning change was to get voted down, then someone can and probably will come in and build 3 or 3.5 story multifamily buildings on that back line in a row, similar to what the rendering showed. And that would accommodate 95 apartment units. We think there's a better way to utilize the property. So that's why we come to this zoning request, is to create a more interesting scenario where you you actually push the R4, the multifamily, towards the back quadrant. Push it in the back corner, which is a lower portion of the site. Elevations are actually lower down there, so the visibility of it is decreased. Pull it away from 4th. And instead of having R4 apartments right up against 4th, we can place single family R1 up on 4th and put that equivalent amount of R4 on the back property on the southeast of the property, which is lower elevation, further away from the neighbors and the street, and it's closer to Restmore, which is already zoned R4. I think it makes a lot of logical sense to do the zoning adjustment and scoot that multifamily and density to the back corner for several reasons. We are not asking for increase in density here. In fact, our current zoning would allow 117 homes or more in the R1 area if you go at a density of 4.3, I believe, homes per acre. And then on the R4, you can currently get 95 or more. And so the total existing zoning as it stands is 212 homes on this property. Our requested zoning change has more to do with enhancing what this property is. It does not have to do with increasing total. I think this is a win-win for everyone, the neighbors, the community, the village, even the people who live on this upscale community. And so you can see on the right-hand side here that we've got a requested change. There's a reduction in total homes on the entire property. So we're trying to reduce the total density of the property as a whole, spread them out, and give it more of a resort-like feel. And so it's a upscale living center and living facility. It's all private infrastructure, so it does not cost any money to the Village of Morton taxpayers. And I think it's the best way to make this property feasible. So again, just to get some specifics on the zoning position adjustment that we're going for is not changing the total acreage of R1 or the total acreage of R4. All we're doing is asking for the position of those zonings to be adjusted. And we can go through the benefits of it, but here's a little bit more of the specifics of the request so that it's all documented there. I mean, existing acreage is the same now as what we're proposing for each of those categories. And of course, the total doesn't change. It's just a change of position. And another thing on the green space, side yard and rear yard spacing, for the R1 single family area, we still want good adequate spacing between these single family homes. We want them to have at least the 10 to 12 foot side yard spacing so you have good green space. We think the front yards, backyards can also have, as you can see on the screen, 25 feet or greater and 30 feet or greater of green space for the homes so that you have a nice, lush, upscale living community. So we're not trying to pack them in and increase density. We're trying to create a better atmosphere and a more upscale living center or resort style living. We've got, it's also another thing that has been brought up by the community, which we appreciate the feedback and concerns, is how does this impact schools and all that. And we're taking a phased approach. This is a 3 to 5 year plan to improve the property. It will be incremental. We will not have all of them built this year or next year. It would start this year, and it would probably be done in about 5 years is my guess at this point. We want to get some work done each year and keep working our way through it, but it would be an eased impact to schools and infrastructure. You can flip through a couple more. I think we've made these public for quite a while now, but and we're welcome. We'll send these out to anybody that wants them, or they can come into our office and discuss some more. These are images. These are conceptual images, but it shows the idea that we want these buildings to not be too imposing. We want them to be attractive, upscale, with masonry, and as well as some drive-its, EIFS or stucco, or a different mix of materials to keep it very interesting. Some metal roofing, accent features. And one of the key things is the visibility from Fourth and from Idlewood is to see homes from the street. So then from every view on Idlewood and Fourth, you would see single family homes. You wouldn't see the higher density as easily because it's on the far back corner of the property at a lower elevation. And the majority of the property is still R1 single family homes. We also plan to have the garage entrance on the rear of each of these homes so that you don't see the garages from either of those streets. You actually have to come into the private drive behind the single family homes, and then pull into your 2-car garage. So we're trying to make this a very attractive enhancement to the community and to the neighborhood. The public feedback has been helpful. A lot of these ideas we already had in our mind, but then with the public feedback, it makes it even sweeter. So we appreciate that. This is also something that has not just been dreamed up overnight. We've been participating in a feasibility study with the local Morton Economic Development Council, which also has been participated with Bradley University and the University of Illinois. And through the housing study and through our personal experience, we've been building homes in Morton for over 12 years now. And so we have a lot of experience of what people want and what brings Morton. And all of our properties have stayed pretty close to 100% filled with mostly high earners. I mean, we're welcome to welcome people of all different types, backgrounds, everything. So that's not a limiting factor, but we do have a rent rate, and because new construction costs a certain amount of money, then we've noticed that most of the people who live in our facilities are usually making middle to higher in the income rate. And that's also what the feasibility study has shown us, that there are some good high earners that are looking for some more housing options that are more upscale and Morton has a lot of untapped potential in that area. So this is one of those projects that fits well as a piece of the puzzle for the overall community. Also, some of the benefits that we think this brings to Morton. You go to the next. Yeah, another thing to think about when we're talking about this enhancement to this particular piece of property, I think this also benefits the entire community and neighborhood because it actually increases the appeal to live in Morton. It's a great community to live in. It also would bring more customers for the local businesses, like all the restaurants. And we all talk about how we want the Field Shopping Center and the restaurants to do well and more options in town, and I agree with that. And the more that we have people with spending capacity who live in our community, the more that you'll see those businesses thrive and grow and even new ones coming down. And this property would also bring in a lot of jobs, new jobs to our area. There would be millions of dollars of investment into this property, which would be a great influx for our local economy. Obviously, it would also increase sales tax revenue, income tax revenue, and the property tax revenue. So I think there's a lot of things to like about it. I hope that gives you a picture, and I'm glad to answer any further questions about it.
Thank you very much, Steve, for the presentation. One note here, again, I'm trying to keep the table quiet until we get to the next section, but just ahead of public conversation, I do want to make a quick note here on the floor. And Counselor, if I misstate something, please, just as usual, get me back on track. But this has changed now from a pure zoning request, whereas R1 and R4 were all becoming R4. Now this has morphed into a request to essentially keep the existing zoning, but to change the layout of the R4 portion and the R1 portion slightly to allow that R4 to encompass a little bit of a different geographical area. Because of that, and because of the private roads and the interaction between R1 and R4, this request sort of morphs to a planned residential development. And the reason I bring that up for the public is under planned residential development, the petitioner tonight, as well as the Village of Morton, will work hand in hand on a number of items that typically the city would not have any input on, or very little input, just permit input. Now they'll have some input on how these roads interact, what the infrastructure looks like, things that they will be able to take a little bit of a heavier hand on. I just wanted to make clear that this is now a planned residential development request with the multiple zoning types of R1 and R4. So, okay, with that said, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me clarify that. So what's before the Planning Commission tonight is a rezoning request. The original request was to make the entirety of the property R4, and the petitioner is within their rights to narrow the scope of that request, which is what Mr. Lehman has done. In conferring with the village prior to tonight, Mr. Lehman understands, and the village and Mr. Lehman both have a shared expectation that his proposed development would be a planned residential development. There's a process for the approval of a planned residential development under section 10-5-8 of the Morton Village Code. Part of that process is a public hearing before the Plan Commission. That public hearing will happen later if Mr. Lehman elects to go forward with this project. The rezoning informs the plan. So there are density limitations for planned residential development under our village code. So it's appropriate so Mr. Lehman can plan the development adequately for him to understand what the present zoning classifications are and to potentially seek, as he's elected, to do modification to those zoning classifications. So there will be a later public hearing on the planned residential development. What you're approving tonight or being asked to approve tonight, what the public hearing is on, is a proposed zoning amendment to change the zoning classification of the property. The scope of that has been narrowed by Mr. Lehman. But coming back to you in the future will be a public hearing on a planned residential development if both rezoning is approved and Mr. Lehman elects to go forward.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and go to the public. I'm going to start by asking Lawson Snell. I see you still have your hand up. If this is for the previous request, let's go ahead and just and go with it so that you have an opportunity to speak.
Actually, it falls so that it works much more for both.
Okay, so go ahead, if you would, if you're going to do a testimony, go ahead and say your name, address, and then swear in.
My name is Brooke Snell. I live at 1824 Deerfield Drive.
And if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Brooke Snell,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
So one of our big concerns is we used to live off of second floor by Kingwood, kind of across from where the other development is, and we live not too far from where this new one is going that we're talking about now. My concern is where are these kids that are going to be moving in, where are they going to school? Grundy is already packed, almost at maximum capacity, and the same with Lincoln. You're talking a lot of more families that are moving into Morton because Morton's awesome. We live here. We've been here 10 years now. And our schools are great. Everyone knows this. But these kids got to go to school somewhere. Where are they going to go? I mean, we already added new rooms and classrooms and the gym and all that to most of the schools, but they're still pretty close to capacity.
So I'm going to speak to that real quickly on behalf. Steve, you can obviously take over, but I just want to talk quickly about how, so from a perspective of planning and zoning, school districts are something that any developer will have to work hand in hand with the community on, specifically the village, both the superintendent as well as the administration of the village will determine if the infrastructure exists for this. And if not, then they're burdened with the task of trying to figure out how to accommodate it. Typically, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of Steve a little bit, when a study is done, those things come up and they already kind of know how they're going to handle those things. So usually by the time it gets to this stage, if it's a 5-year phased plan, the Village of Morton has worked with the developer or the petitioner to sort of determine how that's going to evolve. So I'll say that. Steve, go ahead if you have something to add on that.
Yeah, just like you're saying, Justin, I was going to say something similar. Also, as a community grows, the tax basis for that community also grows, and that feeds into the school district's funds, and that's how I think a healthy community needs both. They need schools to be improved, they need more residents, they need businesses, and they all support each other. And I think this is just one piece of that overall puzzle of enhancing our town.
Okay, I have another question. Because that area is Grundy School, where my kids go, so it's already a taxed area, especially before and after school. There are so many cars, it's insane. How are this going to accommodate the extra traffic, especially during before and after school hours?
Yeah, again, I mean, that's something we'll work with the school district on. It's also timing wise, this is a zoning request, and the timing of it is not 100% defined, but the schools are actively looking at ways to expand. I know we've talked to the mayor and some of the other, I know other people at the school district and the village that are looking into constantly improving the schools and the facilities. And this is one more revenue stream to help support that.
Okay, and the last question I had is how many of your units have to be Section 8 housing?
How many of those will be Section 8? Is that the question?
Yeah, sorry, my computer kind of.
Yeah, no problem. I thought that was what you said. We don't have any intention of any Section 8 here. I have never dealt with Section 8 specifically, and we've always done market rate homes that are upscale, and the rent rates have been in the upper echelon. So we are not pursuing Section 8 on this.
Okay.
Does that get all your questions?
For now, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next person I show. Looks like John Crawford has their hand up. John, if you want to unmute and swear in.
I could be mistaken, but I don't see that John has an audio connection currently.
Roger that. Then we will move down to Jeff Hordesky.
Yeah, good evening.
Hey there, Jeff. How are you?
Great. Jeff Wardesky, 128 Woodcrest.
We'll let you swear in here.
You could raise your right hand for me, please. I state your name.
I, Jeff Wardesky,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I appreciate, the revisions in the plans, because definitely was one of many within the neighborhood, and see many of the neighbors on the line that were not in favor of a full R4 zoning change. So since the plans have evolved over the last number of days here, I just wanted to clarify. So I think the first point is looking for a shift in the zoning, if I use my terms, that the current square footage of the property that's zoned R4 will not change. I think the second point, Mr. Lehman, you made was that you're expecting actually a lower density of property than what's currently zoned in your plans. So there were maybe the first 2 points I wanted to re-clarify through the shift in the application from the original filing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you said, we've appreciated the feedback. Our initial intent was never to make it all multifamily, but we requested some space to figure out a layout that makes sense for the property. But now that we've got a lot further along in that process, yeah, exactly like you said, we are not changing the square footage of the R4 or the R1. It's staying the same. The total density for the R4 is staying the same as it currently is. We're not changing that or increasing it. And on the R1, we actually think we can bring that down to get more space, more green space amongst the community, because we do want to have some other amenities such as a walking path around the pond and a lot of landscaping for some good coverage between the homes and neighboring properties. So yeah, you are correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And then, with the, and it may be one for our chairman, from a due process type of perspective, as the application has shifted, and definitely there's been, many discussions, of course, amongst the folks in the neighborhood, letters of protest filed and such. Will this be resolved tonight, or is there the opportunity for a delay so the community can reconnect together and as appropriately retract or re-sign that petition?
Yes, so I will, go ahead, Pat, if you'd like to step in. I like it when you talk.
Yeah, on matters of procedure is often me. The Plan Commission has the authority, if Plan Commission makes a motion and it's seconded, to table the matter to a future meeting for additional debate and consideration by the Plan Commission.
All right, very good. And I'm sure there's a number of the other neighbors that may second in on that perspective on a potential delay for further clarity, as the plans have evolved significantly in a number of days. So thank you for that.
Does that answer? Yeah, go ahead.
Two things briefly, just matters of procedure. I know we have some participants who are joining us by telephone, and I'm not sure if this is noted when you call in, but if you're on the phone and want to be heard on this case, in order to raise your hand, it's my understanding that you're to dial *9, and that raises your hand. So just as a reminder to our telephone participants, and I know we at least had one, Mr. Crawford had raised his hand to participate, but we didn't show an active microphone for him, so we're unable to facilitate that. If there is somebody who like Mr. Crawford or others, who want to be heard, and you have any difficulty on the microphone side, you can always phone in. The phone-in number for the meeting is 312-626-6799. The meeting ID is 833-7021-5644, and then a #. So just in an additional effort to make sure all who desire to be heard can be heard, I wanted to remind participants of those matters, Your Honor.
Appreciate that. It looks like if John Crawford still does not show with audio, so I'm going to move to Pat Kloppenstein. Pat, you've already been sworn in, so go ahead.
Just like at work, I got to figure out how to get the mute button off. All right, just a couple quick questions. Hopefully I won't take up too much more of the group's time. So, Mr. Lehman, you mentioned no village funds are being used. So how is the property or the layout being maintained? Is it an HOA? Or was that just for construction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. I tried to touch on it just a bit, but I didn't spend much time on it. All of the infrastructure and the drives and roadway within this property are private. That means that I'm paying for putting it all in, I'm paying for maintaining it. So yeah, it's not a cost burden to the village.
So the maintenance will be funded by HOA more likely.
Yeah, it's funded by the owner right now, but yeah, eventually if we were to set up an HOA, then it would be that. In the meantime, it's the developer owner of the property that covers it.
Okay. So the R4, what makeup of the units are we talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom, studio, efficiency? What's the makeup thought so far?
Yeah, and we've had a lot of feedback from the properties we've developed so far, and accurate hands-on data has been very helpful. We see that there's demand for the 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms primarily is what we're seeing. And part of that, obviously with the COVID situation, a lot more people are doing work from home. And so if they were teetering on the edge of maybe a 2 or a 3, that puts them over the edge where they really want that 3 bedroom and set it up as an office. So yeah, it's primarily 2.
Okay. You mentioned kind of higher level building materials. So you mentioned stone or brick. Kind of explain that a little bit, just so we're seeing how does it fit in the fabric of the current area down on the south side of Morton, if you will.
Yeah, well, along the streetscaping, all the way down 4th and Idlewood, for sure, that's a priority because that's your visual. So we want to make sure that the fronts of those homes have masonry, basically between stone, brick, and some sort of a stucco or drive-it type EFIS product. So really spending the money to dress up that street side for sure. And I mean, I think the requirements are at least 35%, but we think we can go higher than that, especially because of the visibility of it.
Yeah, EFIS is a maintenance nightmare, but okay. That's my so I think maybe my next bigger question, which is not necessarily a zoning thing, but I live on Idlewood Street. It's known as the Idlewood 500 by myself and others. I've called the police department multiple times over the years when I used to work at home more about people going 40, 45 miles an hour down the street, especially when I see kids walking to and from school. I'm just concerned about the overall increase in traffic. I've also wondered why there hasn't been homes there since I moved into the area. I grew up in Morton, but not in this part of town. So I'm not surprised that there's development happening. Just looking at, and it's more of, maybe it's more of a policing thing, more of a village thing of how are we going to deal with the additional traffic on Idlewood and 4th, and I think somebody else mentioned Queenwood also, where nobody drives anywhere near the speed limit. I don't think that's a Mr. Lehman question, but that's a concern of mine.
I think just a touch, I'll touch on that, and then Justin or anyone else can as well. But yeah, as a way of controlling the traffic flow, we are still maintaining only 2 entrances, exits from this property, so that all of that is diverted to just what's already created for where it meets up with Maywood on 4th, and then Idlewood would have 1 outlet. So I think that scenario would lend itself to the village and the police to be able to create either stop signs or lights or whatever they need just to control traffic and slow them down, of course.
One more question, and then I'll shut up. What do you plan on union or non-union contractors working on the development over time?
Yeah, every time that we have launched a project, we've encouraged both union and non-union. We just see that we want to put valuable local workers to use, and so we don't really discriminate based on union or non-union. We're open to all and both.
Okay, Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kloppenstein. Looks like our next person on the list that I show is Melinda Fuller. Melinda, if you're there, can you go ahead and swear in? State your name, address, and swear in.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Melinda Fuller. I live at 1512 Brookcrest Avenue on the corner of Brookcrest and Maywood.
If you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Melinda Fuller,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, my name is Melinda Fuller. I live on the corner of Brookcrest and Maywood in the Greenview Estates subdivision. Thank you all for your time. To all of the zone commissioners, I submitted on behalf of myself and 113 of my resident neighbors and friends a petition this morning in opposition of the rezoning request. As my neighbor Jeff had previously mentioned, the presentation that Steve just gave is a considerable change from the application and even a significant evolution since we had a discussion, Steve and his partners and myself, as of last Thursday. And so I think a lot of the concerns are still valid, and I think that there's a lot that we would still, remains unknown because this is a change that is just being presented today. I completely understand that there's a legal right to what I believe Mr. McGrath referred to as a downgrade in the request, or a narrowing of the request to a planned residential development. And I understand, and please clarify, that it appears as if they need to file separately a temporary application for this planned residential development. Is that what you were stating, Mr. McGrath?
Yeah, let me address the planned residential development.
That'd be great, thank you.
So under 10.5.8 of the Village Code, the big broad strokes, what would happen is there would be a preliminary plan that would be worked on between Mr. Lehman and village staff and vetted kind of through normal review process internally, and then would come back for the Plan Commission for a public hearing before final approval. So in general terms, you're correct. And that would be a subsequent step after tonight. The rezoning has bearing on the composition of that plan because there are density limitations in planned residential on the basis of the underlying zoning classifications. But yes, you're absolutely correct that there would be a preliminary plan submitted for the planned residential development and a public hearing before the Plan Commission before ultimate final approval by the village.
And before you leave, I have one more clarifying question to ask. So just the request then today is now an R1 to an RS. Is that the request?
The request today is the R4. It's not an RS, it would be R4. So planned residential developments are permitted in each of the zoning classifications, RS through R4.
So really the only thing that we are discussing is the movement of that portion that Mr. Lehman had outlined to that back corner.
That's correct.
Okay, well, with that clarification, I guess the only comment that I would like to make is I think that a lot of residents' concerns could have been addressed much earlier in the process through clear communication, not necessarily by the developer. I think Steve has been really open to discussing it, and we really appreciate that. But like I said, it was an evolution that apparently culminated today at some point. So that I think has been quite frustrating, and I feel that it's necessary to voice that, as that has been the comment throughout the neighborhood, and I say that on behalf of myself and my neighbors. With regard to the planned residential development, I do want to address the fact that Mr. Lehman had indicated that there were struggles with infrastructure with the planned residential development. It allows for a much smaller lot size, it appears, and therefore you would have potentially an equal number of residents on a smaller portion of land. So I guess I have a question. I question the infrastructure comment as it appears to have the same stress in addition to the multifamily dwellings on that relatively modest piece of property, about 33 acres. And with regard to the comment about the property tax revenue, again, I have the same question as to how that comment was made. It will likely gain more property tax than the current ag land that it's being used for, but not necessarily outweighing the R1 without the planned residential development, but more so the R1 as a truly single family, which I believe was the intent of the original zoning. And I think all of that needs to be, I would hope that the village, the plan commission, the board consider that as it reviews all the elements outlined in the municipal code section E5, specifically as it relates to the public interest versus the sole benefit of the property applicant alone, so this developer and the property owner. These are all concerns I realize that are going to be an ongoing conversation, given that today we are really focused on the shifting, I'll call it, of that R4. But as the public is not involved in the upcoming discussions, I implore the commission and the board to consider these elements, consider the concerns that are outlined in the petition, as I believe they still apply. Also, in terms of partnership, I know that many other of my fellow residents who have spoken today, both on this development as well as the development on Queenwood and Second, have expressed concerns about the school district, and both Mr. McGrath and Mr. Lehman and Mr. Chairman have all stated that there's going to be a close connection to kind of discuss those impacts. However, I do think it's worth noting that as of Thursday evening, the school board was completely unaware of this project, and given the significant impact, we would expect greater communication and partnership, even though we do understand that it is incumbent upon the board to kind of figure out those aspects and not the sole job of the plan commission. But if there is going to be that partnership, we the public would expect that the developer continue to work start to work more closely with all impacted organizations, as this has a greater impact on all Morton citizens.
Terrific. Thank you, Melinda. If there's nothing else, I will move on to the next question. And I did receive looks like a note here that John Crawford has got audio. So John, just FYI, I'm going to finish out with this petition first. And then before we close out the public section, I will make sure we come back to you so that you can ask questions on that. Okay, next up I show Tom Schoen. Tom, are you there?
Hi, yes I am. Tom Schoen, 347 East Idlewood.
Great, we'll swear you in here in just a minute. Pat, if you're ready.
If you could raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Tom Schoen.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I had sent an email to a number of the commission members based on the change plans that Steve shared with us. I want to keep my comments focused on what has been mentioned before, and that is a total solution here that includes the traffic concerns. Those are very critical. There have been more than at least 2 that I can remember in recent memory accidents in front of our house. There seems to be a lot of speeding. Tonight I was out in my garage working for probably 30 minutes. Kind of a new one to me, but a motorcycle made a pass right in front of our house. I'm pretty sure that's 2 valid issues. One, the pass is not legal, and I'm pretty sure they were doing more than 40. I know it looks like the updated drawing has an entrance onto Idlewood. It looks like straight across from about the pool. The village has made changes over the years. We're very grateful to have the concerts in the park. We're grateful for the new pool, but they've made several changes in the parking on Idlewood Street there to address congestion. I believe this will only increase that with that Idlewood exit and entrance. And like I said, on our street alone, we hosted a party 3 years ago. I had mentioned to my brother, hey, park on our driveway. He elected not to. Police officer visited our home, asking about my brother, and basically informing him and asking him to move his car because he parked too far away from the curb. So today when you go down Idlewood, if there's cars parked opposite of each other, it gets a little congested. And when there's somebody that hosts a party and they park in the street, which I certainly hope is continued to be able to do that, but it gets congested. So the village as a whole, and the developer, Steve, and his company needs a total solution here for the traffic. As they mentioned, around Grundy, it gets very busy there. Our son went there, but we've had our own, car hit in front of our house since we've been here. So again, there's a lot of speeding that goes on. Police try to compensate for that. They could be out there every day, and it wouldn't be enough. So just, I think, dismiss that and say the police will do better is not a very good solution. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Tom, and I agree with you. It's a coordinated effort, which I will be meeting with the village and the police. We can all get together and discuss that, and what we need to do as a developer to accommodate, and then what the village does, what the police do. It'll be a coordinated effort. That's a top priority.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, we'll move, if that ends your comments for now, Tom, I will move on to the next petitioner the next public that I show, which is Bill Streeter. Bill, if you're there, feel free to announce your name, address, and then we will swear you in.
Hi, I'm Bill Streeter. I live at 121 Woodcrest.
You can raise your right hand, repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Bill Streeter,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony that I am about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question about the single-family dwellings that are going to be constructed. Are these going to be constructed in accordance with the R1 zoning requirements and subdivision requirements of the village code?
The current plan for this is R1 and R4. The applicant has simply shifted the R4, traded a little of that and a little of the R1. So yes, under the current request, the single family homes, whatever that's determined via the planned residential development, will be guided underneath that current zoning.
If I may jump in as well. As a part of the planned residential development, a component of the planned residential development could be modification to the otherwise minimum requirements for setbacks and lot sizes. But any inclusion of those components would be addressed as a part of that preliminary plan, public hearing, and final approval of the planned residential. In the absence of an approval of the planned residential development or a variance, the developer would have to meet all R1.
So under the planned residential development, the houses, if approved, the single family dwellings, for example, could have 2-foot setbacks, if that's what's proposed and that's what gets approved.
There are, and I'm answering not on behalf of the petitioner, but clarifying procedural, because I think your question is as much procedure. There are density limitations within a planned use or a planned residential development in R1 zoning districts. And so that would be a contributing factor. I would have, they would have to meet all zoning requirements. So at 2-foot setbacks, unless side setbacks, unless the lots were very large, I don't imagine they can meet the R1 density limit, which I think is 4.6 dwelling units per acre. But yeah, the the reduction would be addressed through that planned residential development, and that comes back for future public hearing.
Very good. I would just also join with Mr. Hordesky's request that this matter be continued so the public has a chance to really dive into this new plan that apparently came out of today. You know, a lot of us made a diligent effort to find out what was going on last week, and now it's changed. So we really makes it hard to consider what is being proposed and whether or not we have objections. So I would encourage and respectfully request the commission to continue this to the next hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. We will move now to, looks like the Fisk household. If you would like to swear in.
Okay. Oh, that's no, that's not. That's not. No, that's not us.
Oh, that's you guys.
Okay. My husband Gary Fisk.
Okay. Before you get going, let me, if Gary, you're going to be the one speaking, if I could have you raise your right hand and repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Gary Fisk.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I have just a question on the zoning adjustment for the requested change down to 169 homes on that 33.8 acres. You know, we live in Greenview Estates. When you look at Greenview and you look at the smaller development just west of our development, and then Sutherland, and then Summerfield, and then Newbury Court and Sheila Court, that's about 100 acres, give or take an acre or so. There are 208 dwellings on that 100 acres. And we're going to put 169 homes in 33 acres. That seems pretty dense to me. What do you think?
The question is regarding density, it sounds like. Steve, why don't, to speak to that, why don't you let us know what the density maximums are and how did you come up with the density you have finally determined here today?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. It's a great question. I appreciate that. Again, the existing zoning allows for 107. We're talking about zoning today. That's the primary thing. And the current zoning allows for 117. I agree with Gary on the fact that that's too dense. We don't want that. That's part of why we're here, is to actually bring it to something that's more realistic but still financially feasible. And so what we're proposing on this requested change, that we're down to a 74. We're reducing the density compared to what's allowed now by, what is that, 40% or something. It's a pretty significant drop in density, meaning more space. So I think that we agree, Gary. You and I agree that the density ought to be reduced. That's what we're requesting as part of this master plan, to create more of a spread out resort type living. And most of the green space that we have is from the feedback that we're getting from people from our customers and personal experience, is a lot of our demographic. We don't want to compete with what you've got at Joseph Estates. You've got a great thing going there. I think the demographics that we're appealing to are those who are looking for a little bit of a narrower lot, but a deeper lot. So it's got green space that goes further back, but you still have less density than what somebody could do today. So I think we actually agree when you come down to it. Also, this zoning change is the limiting factor. We're not saying that we would necessarily hit the ceiling of these limits. We're just saying we don't even need to hit the ceiling of what's already there. We think we can bring it all down and create a better resort style upscale living center. I think we actually agree on that, if I'm not mistaken.
Have you purchased the property yet?
We do have, yes, we have an agreement with the current landowner on the purchase. Yes.
Is it finalized?
We have not closed on the purchase, I guess, to be clear, but we do have an agreement.
Okay, and I hear the term upscale a lot. And for the single dwelling homes, what do you think one of those houses would go for?
Boy, I mean, that's a little bit of guesswork, but what we've got in our plan or projections is to be in that 300 plus or minus price range. So it'll depend on, we're actually going to have a lot of variety on here too. And I think it is important to have some that appeal and to different price points, as well as some people may want a 2-story, some may want a 1-story, and some may want a 3-car garage or a 2. So we're not pinning down price points, but generally, yeah, I think it's in that 300 plus or minus.
And you're going to be the builder of all these homes, or are you going to subcontract things out to other builders?
Well, it's both. I mean, our experience is leading the design and the construction management, but we love to hire a local workforce, local contractors and carpenters and the whole deal. So we will be hiring local contractors to put the work in place.
Okay, I'm finished. Thank you very much. I'll wait a minute.
Yeah, just finish.
Chief of Staff wants to say something.
No, I'm just telling them what to do here.
All right, so we're done. I'll initiate an ejection sequence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, so it looks like we've got everybody who had hands up initially with regard to this request. Do we have other people that we're missing here?
There was a question that came in through the chat.
How will the development be prioritized?
Development will prioritize.
Your audio is kind of going sideways on you.
Sorry, there was a question through the chat that asked how the development will be prioritized. Would it be the apartments first or the residential first?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got, like we said, we've got this sort of this phased approach, and I think we're trying to minimize the disruption to local traffic and neighbors. So the best plan is to start in the back corner, the back quadrant of the property, and start improving that area and then working our way out. That way we have less disruption to basically that back quadrant is primarily the multifamily, but you also have some of the single family on the corners of the back quadrant. So it could be a combination. And I think we're going to get up or ease down based on the demand.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to this petition. The next question for this petition, Mark's iPad is the label. Mark's iPad, if you will state your name, address, and then if you have testimony, we'll swear you in.
Yeah, my name is Mark Miller, and I live at 132 Woodcrest.
Mark, if you could raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Mark Miller.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Affirm.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'd kind of like to start with just, a comment on the study that Steve showed the slide. His desire is for people living in urban areas to be a community like Morton. And, what we're seeing is all these dense apartment building type buildings being moved to Morton. So it's like you're going to bring urban people here and they're going to live in an urban setting. And that's really doing away with the value of, what we enjoy. Morton is an enjoyable place to live because we have so many single family homes, and the number of apartment basically, or condos, if that's what they will be coming in, is going to defeat that. And I question kind of the thought behind it because, looking at our current environment, you see in all the big cities, people are escaping those cities because of COVID-19, right? You have an issue where you're going to put a lot of people into buildings where they're captive in those buildings only. They have nowhere to go. There's no yard. So, you know, you're saying, Steve, that you're going to reduce the number of houses on that property, but the reduction is all in the R1 side, and you've stayed with the same maximum number on the R4 side. And I see that as just a major problem. I believe the development, if you have that much rental this close to us, it's going to devalue our property. We're going to be coming back to the board asking for a reduction in our taxes. So you're not going to have the great benefit that you're saying, I don't believe, having to do with the tax revenue. That area, if it was built just like ours, would have about 78 homes. And I just kind of looked at it, and that's not including the strip that you've got down there on that's R4 now. You know, and that could handle some of the other buildings, but we think that what you're planning on is going to be, you know, just a difficult thing for the community to handle. It's going to affect all of us. You are planning to rent mostly the 95 houses that you're planning to build. Is that true?
Yeah, on the multifamily, we're planning to set it up to where it could be purchased as condos or rented, and that way, as the markets fluctuate, you'll see demand for homeowners versus rental scenarios. So I think we're setting it up to stay successful. We want to keep it upscale, well cared for. But also to your point of people from urban areas, we've seen that they have a desire to live in a community that has more green space, more trees, that type of thing. I think that's a positive. I think that Morton can really benefit from having others who join the community and appreciate it, because but yeah, I mean, we're not trying to create another urban area, so I don't want it to be misunderstood. We're actually saying there are people who are living in other urban areas that are high density, that don't have green space. I think they're going to appreciate a space that does have more plants, trees, a walking path around a pond, more open air for many reasons. I mean, the COVID example you brought up might even support that idea. But we're thinking long term, and COVID may hopefully disappear, or not disappear, but be eradicated hopefully soon. But we're thinking, 20, 30 years down the road, even, where green space is good for well-being, and the walking path, the pond, even a little fishing area for people to take their kids or grandkids and enjoy the outdoors a little bit more. So we're thinking of creating an entire environment.
I understand that, but those people have nowhere to go, right? They couldn't use that green space if we end up in a lockdown situation. If our governor decides to do that again, if there's another virus that comes, right? That you're really packing in a lot of people into that R4 area that's there. From my point of view, it would be, why couldn't we reduce some of the multifamily buildings and maybe keep the increase on the ones that actually have a yard, if they have a yard.
So Mark, I'll speak to that quickly. This is Justin Farrell, the commissioner. I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware here. So one of the challenges that we always run into in these zoning meetings is the differentiation between, public feedback on the zoning, and then when it starts to get into public feedback that might become a little bit more philosophical or theoretical. One of the challenges we have on this site is that this R4 zoning already exists. And for all of you homeowners, that's an important point. That zoning is there. Someone, including the petitioner, could have just gone in and built the maximum density without ever having this dialogue. And so I guess my challenge is I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak, because I think it's important, but I also want to try to keep this on task to some extent. The zoning is what it is. We have a petitioner in front of us who is saying, look, I'm trying to work within it and reduce some of the density. So I want us to bear that in mind a little bit as we move forward. This is already an adjustment down to what the existing density metrics are, and that R4 exists. So Anyway, I just wanted to make sure we don't get too far astray on that.
It doesn't seem like you could put 95 housing units on that 5 acres. I don't see how that's possible. You couldn't have enough parking for that many. I'm a little confused. I looked at the numbers and I looked at the plot on the zoning map, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And I might be, confused, but that's sure what it looked like. You'd have those 5 buildings in a row. There's no parking. You're talking about 17 units or 18 units in each of those buildings.
Yeah, it's, again, I'm just staying with what's existing already approved for that zoning. I'm not making any modifications to the density of the R4. So whether or not we actually get that many units in it, it may be less, it may be, but we're just not really changing that one, and we are reducing the other. So as a whole, the entire property is being reduced in density. I think that bodes well.
It's still, it doesn't help. I'm sorry, but anyway, I'll let that go. We covered the other things I think I thought about, but just I have a lot of experience. My parents lived in a condo complex in Wheaton, Illinois, and the maintenance and the fees are just an ongoing struggle, and that will be for this as well. So. I'm kind of wondering, I'm hoping you have deep pockets, or the people behind you have very deep pockets to keep this, so it doesn't really devalue the Morton community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving forward, it looks like the next person I had written down was Don Jones. I don't see, is Don still there? Yeah, Don, did you have something to say? If so, please go ahead and state your name, address, and then we can swear you in for testimony.
Great, thanks very much. Don Jones, 77 Newberry.
Don, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Don Jones.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks for hearing my testimony. We just bought this house at 77 Newberry, moving from Metamora. Bought the property because of the area around it, the houses there in Southwick, and the privacy. I've spoken to many of our to-be new neighbors. We're just moving in. A lot of concern about the 3-story, I think, is the primary concern, the 3-story multifamily going in. And, Mr. Lehman talked about the fact that the change in the plan has now moved that building further to the southeast, which is actually closer to Newberry, right in all of our backyards. I just would ask the zoning committee to consider, or maybe it's in the future meeting that will happen, consider only allowing maybe a 2-story environment to be erected there. I think we would all be much more comfortable if it was just residential homes like has been discussed here. But the 3-story aspect of this, I think, gives people a lot of concern about a degradation of housing values in the neighborhood around the property. The other thing for the zoning committee to consider, I think, is the fact that the plan is now for 3 to 5 years of construction. So that's 1, 3, 5 years of virtually continuous construction with heavy equipment, mud up and down 4th Street, Queenwood, and in the surrounding environment. So I think it'll be quite a detriment to what's right now a very pleasant community to have a very extended amount of construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Steve, you can speak to this, but it's my understanding that the revised plan does address Mr. Jones's concern, and the apartments are, in fact, being set up as 2-story. Is that correct?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I see where you live on the cul-de-sac there, and we're actually not bringing any of the multifamily any closer to your home than what's already allowed. So that's just actually not true. That R4 already goes along the whole south strip. So The only thing we're doing is taking some of that R4 away from the road and placing it further north on northeast, like up against the Westmore property line there. So it really should have zero effect on your home that's also 250 feet away from what's already R4. I don't see it having an impact as far as that goes.
Perhaps I misunderstood. I thought there was a comment earlier that in order to make it more desirable to the other areas nearer to the school, that you were going to move the multifamily further to the southeast. So it seemed like there was a shift in the location. And also, could you go back and revisit the 3-story versus 2-story? I thought the 2-story discussion was on the complex near 2nd Street. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess if we looked at the zone maps on the presentation we put together, it shows, let me see if Gary can pull this up here, but it shows a graphic that'll help bring some understanding on that. So when we said southeast, I mean, the southeast corner's already got R4, so we're not actually changing that corner, but just was R4 on the 4th Avenue over to the side that that's adjacent to the Westmore property, which is already R4. So, and then we're not touching that entire bean field that is south of this property that's behind Gary Long's property. So we're not even doing anything to that. There's a lot of buffer. I don't see it having an impact or any significant impact at all. You'd be well beyond the 250 range of any changes that we're requesting. So you just don't see it having an impact there. And as far as the construction timeframe, I mean, there's always going to be construction. I hope there's a lot of people probably on this meeting that are in construction. And that's a good thing to have construction work for our companies and our citizens. So there will always be construction as long as there's growth. That's a healthy sign. But yeah, we will definitely do everything we can to minimize it and have a stabilized entrance with a rock road so that we get the mud worked off before we hit the streets and keep the streets cleaned up with street sweepers. I mean, that's always a priority. And so I also don't think that we'll do our best to not let that get out of hand. It's always a priority for us. We work close with Jamie Bullard and others at the city. So even if we wanted to, they wouldn't let us get away with it. And we don't want to anyways. We want it to be clean, appropriate. Yeah, we're also bringing down, back to the height issue. As it is currently zoned on the R4 area, you can go up to 45 feet tall, and you can do a 3.5-story building. Our plan is to bring that down. So we want the buildings that we have planned, we are talking about, we're in the probably 10 feet lower than what you can do right now. So that's a full 4-level lower than what you can do at the moment. So I don't see that being a detriment either. In fact, I mean, just like I said, the current zoning allows for something that we don't even want to maximize because we want to soften it up and make it better.
Okay, just to clarify, thank you for all that. The 35-foot planned height, that includes the peak of the roof, so it is a two-level apartment, not a 3-level apartment. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is possible. We have to fine-tune the floor plans and all that. So, and the peak, pitch, and width, the plan to that number. But yeah, the bottom line is it is definitely going to be a reduction compared to what we can do.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Don. Looks like our next, let's see here. It looks like next public is, it just says Galaxy Note 9. So if that's you, go ahead and state your name, address, and we will swear you in for testimony.
That's me. That's Mike Reiner, Galaxy Note 9.
Go ahead and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Michael Reiner,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
My name's Mike Reinhardt. I'm the HOA president for the Newberry Court, the cul-de-sac that's just south of the proposed development. And even though we're not within that 250-foot distance from the proposed development site and the rezoning, we do feel we're impacted by what's in the works to get taken care of. And so with input from all of the majority, 90+% of the folks that are in this cul-de-sac on Newberry Court, there is no, everyone is in opposition that has responded. So we got 19 homes, and I've gotten responses from 16 of them, and others can't be reached. But essentially, some of the concerns regarding this development and the rezoning that's being proposed right now is one that I think is a common theme among most folks that have been talking on this, in regards to, number one, the safety of the residents living within a close vicinity of this proposed development. One of them being children. I know myself, I have young children that will be attending grade school at Grundy, and many of the neighbors that are in our area do also have children that are either in elementary school or whatnot. So the safety concern is probably one of the biggest topics of commonality between everyone that I have spoken to in the neighborhood. And this has been discussed before, but if this was to go through and the amount of density of population in this area is going to increase, the concern is the traffic. The concern is going to be the safety of our children going to and from school, and quite possibly the pool. And that is one of the top points for opposition for our neighborhood. Even though we're not in that 250-foot range, we still feel we are affected by it, and like to present some information. The communication and partnership is key. I don't know if what's in code or not, but some of the information that we've seen so far has just been disseminated to our neighborhood here within the last, last week, less than last week. So communication and communication to affected areas we would like to see happen, so that we could voice and review and try to provide valuable input as to the decisioning of this rezoning. Is it in plan that when this rezoning is to occur, that a definitive action item plan as far as safety and infrastructure, is that something that can be done? I know this is a dynamic and fluid type development that seems to be going on, because there's some changes as has happened even in the last couple of days that I'm aware of. But will before anything's approved, will there be a concrete solidified plan in order to ensure that this community development takes everything into consideration, including neighborhoods that are affected by it? And if so, we'd like to have a little bit more input and or perspective on what the possibility of that happening is.
Pat, do you want to handle that? Because it's a little bit of procedural in nature.
Yeah, so the rezoning tonight, if approved and Mr. Lehman elects to proceed forward, if approved by the village board at their next meeting and Mr. Lehman elects to proceed forward with the development, has indicated an intent to go forward with a planned residential development. And so we would have a preliminary plan prepared, reviewed by village staff in close collaboration in that process, and then a public hearing on the plan for the planned residential development, at which time each of you, as well as any member of the public, is invited to attend the meeting and participate. As a part of the planned residential development plan, things like the plan for utilities, the plan for roadways, some of those things are addressed through that process. Even if Mr. Lehman does not elect to proceed forward with the planned residential development route, regardless of whether this property is rezoned, if it is to be subdivided and developed, the village has a thorough site plan review and subdivision review process, which happens administratively before any land can be subdivided and split up within the village. So short answer to your question is yes, based on what's contemplated here, yes, there will be future public hearings unless Mr. Lehman's intentions change regarding this project, and each of you would be invited and allowed to participate in a like manner at that future public hearing.
As far as the communication and invitation of any of those public hearings, what is the the benchmark or guidelines on what how's that to occur?
Village code directs the manner in which public hearings are held. Generally, there's published notice in the newspaper, an agenda is posted on the village's website. So those are a couple different ways in which you can obtain more information about the meeting. The Plan Commission meetings are always on the fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m.
Okay. I don't want to duplicate what anybody else had discussed. But like I said, the safety is number one from the residents in our neighborhood. Any type of possible property depreciation is also something that has been discussed. The current school system capacity has also been something discussed. And we just want to ensure that folks that are in the neighborhoods can be actively involved in it if at all possible.
Thank you, Michael. If you think of anything else, I will circle back before we adjourn the public section. So I will move forward now to, it looks like you're labeled as Justin in the participant list. Justin, if you are there and you wish to speak, please give your name, full address, and we'll swear you in.
Yes, my name is Justin Jansen. I live on 41 Newberry Court.
Justin, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Justin Jansen.
Do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I had a question around the numbers that were presented on the current zoning and also the requested change. I do second a lot of or all of the concerns that have been stated, but I'll be specific with my questions. My understanding on the numbers of homes under the current zoning and the requested change. So under current zoning, those were the maximum number of dwellings allowed for both the R1 and R4. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct from my calculations. That can be verified by anyone on the council, but yeah, that's based on the acreage and the density limits. That's
okay. So specific to current zoning, I attended the informational meeting that was held at Idlewood Park on Thursday evening, and also picked up one of the packets of information that you handed out at that time. Specifically with the number of homes that the current zoning allows for the R4 zoned area, the packet that you handed out on Thursday stated that that was 105 homes. The slide that you showed earlier in this meeting that number had changed to 95, a reduction of 10. And so I'm curious what changed in the past 4 days that caused that number to change. I see the field out of my backyard, and I know the size of that field has not changed. So I'm curious, in the past 4 days, what has caused that number to be reduced?
yeah, that's a great question, very valid question. And I had because the way the zoning process is set up, the initial application gets submitted, and then you can follow up with supplemental information. And during that time period, we were preparing more detailed info, which you have now, and a more detailed calculation of the size, square footage, acreage of the R1 and R4. So the change is just getting more detailed and diving into the specific dimensions on a different level of detail, basically. It's the concept is the same. There's some other places that showed that there's about 6 acres or so on the R4 before, and so I think I was running numbers off of that assumption, but now I've got it down to the 10th of an acre, or the even the 100th, I think. So it's just diving into more detail.
Okay, so based on your more detail, you've determined that current zoning would allow for 10 fewer homes than what you presented on Thursday. Is that correct? In the R4 category. The square footage that you're proposing, there's no change to that square footage, if that's correct.
Yeah, and again, that's probably around numbers, because I believe that if we look up the R1, I think you can have 4.3 units per acre, and if there's times 28.35 acres, so yeah, it's in that neighborhood of 120 homes possibly. But I guess the point of the slide is to show that we're not going to utilize all of what we can now, whether that number is 117 or 121. Either way, we are bringing it down from that to a lower density situation. That's the bottom line.
Sure, and I guess the point of my question is, and again, I'm comparing the information that you personally handed to me on Thursday, and then the information that you had presented earlier in this meeting. That the current allowable number of homes with the current zoning, the difference between the two reports, the number was reduced by 10 for R4. But the requested change that you were proposing has actually increased by 10. So although the current zoning allows, from what you say, 10 less than what you presented Thursday, you're now proposing 10 more. So there's really a net change there of 20. In the R4 multifamily dwellings. And I just was curious on what your plan changes have caused for the fluctuation in those numbers.
Yeah, it's same deal here where through the zoning request process, we have dove in deeper into the details and looking at the specific density limits and getting more accurate calculations of square footage. And all that, as we refine that data, we're updating the proposal, the presentation. And so what you have now in front of the screen is the most current, most accurate information that I have at the moment. So trying to really hone in on the best facts that we have. But obviously all of that will be confirmed through the Village of Morton, throughout the planned residential development process or in the permitting process. Either way, that all gets confirmed with what the Village of Morton sees as the right numbers. So there are checkpoints there to make sure we're on the same.
Sure. So just confirming that as you learned more that the allowable density was less than what you originally thought, you've actually increased your planned density of the R4.
Yeah, the current presentation is what we're going with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It looks like the next individual I show, I thought there was another, but it looks like we're now to Kelly Pinter. Kelly, are you there? Going once, going twice. Okay. Not hearing. Oh, there we go.
All right. Technology is great when it works.
Agreed. Go ahead and state your name and address when you can, and then we'll swear you in.
Hello, Brian Pinner, 1800 Deerfield Drive.
And if you could raise your hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Brian Pinter.
I do solemnly swear or affirm.
Solemnly swear.
That the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding.
That the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate you hearing me out. Just a quick question. I know we've talked about, right, this is a question about where does the R4 zone reside going forward? But I hear resounding concerns about, right, the density, how many people we're going to put in the acreage that is there. So I just had a question about the R4 zone. When was that established? Was it 15 years ago, 30 or more years ago? And is there any process or any due course, right, that the community can take to look at that, right? Depending on when that was passed and zoned, a lot changes. I don't know what this community looked like at the time it was passed. So I think that's to the board.
Yeah, it is. And so to speak to that, Brad, have we been able to establish when that R4 zoning, when that came into play?
Actually, I did a little bit of research. I found zoning map that dated back to 1975 when that was part of the village. It was zoned R3 at the time, but R3 is what we now know as R4.
Right.
So to the south, as it pushed north, as things developed, Newburyport, Sheila, the Morton Medical Center, though at that time, all those areas became rezoned. So I would look at this piece as kind of the last man standing that had always been multifamily.
Thank you for doing that research.
To the question the gentleman asked regarding who can invoke zoning amendment request, essentially what you ask is who can have that looked at, which essentially I interpret to mean who can ask for the property to be rezoned. And that would be the Village Board of Trustees, the Plan Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, or a person with interest in the property. That means somebody who's under contract to buy it, or who owns it, or who has a lease of the property.
I will add to that a little bit, Brian. There have been times in the past where, through a review of existing zoning, an oddity is noticed, and sometimes at that point, the village will bring something forward to try to conform some outstanding zoning. But typically, it's not the practice of the village or anyone to interfere with public properties that zoning is in conformance with what was original. So yeah, I think short of buying this is kind of the path it's on.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, as I look through the list here, I don't see any other hands raised, but I do want to just point out, if they're still on, we did have a participant from the early portion, one of the earlier petitions. I think it was John Crawford. John, if you're still here, before we call for final comments or adjournment on the public, I'd like to go ahead and go back and let you have an opportunity to speak. And I believe, if I'm reading the notes correctly, you are actually requesting some commentary on case number 20-03. This would be the Harding change from B3 to I2. If that's the case, John, and you're on here, please go ahead and state your name and address, and then we'll swear you in.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Very well, thank you.
Oh, wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Justin.
We can hear you.
My name.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I've been struggling here tonight with this thing. My name is John Crawford. I have 25659 Harding Road and 25691 Harding Road.
John, if you could repeat after me, I'll swear you in before you proceed. I state your name.
I, John Crawford.
Do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so my property is adjacent to the subject property, and we share several hundred feet of property line. And I have several points that I would like to make. A, there's, as I understand it, an ample supply of I-2 zone property in the village currently. And in my particular area, all the I-2 development has been west of Main Street. I know there's I-2 zoning north of me, but the fact of the matter is, in the last 15 or so years, roughly, there has been one building constructed and another proposed and approved that are B zoning. And the only other development in the area was a residence on my property. Point being, there has been no, even though it's zoned I-2, there has been no construction in the area. Some of the personal concerns we have are what's proposed for the development. We're really concerned about light pollution because this business will be 6 or 7 days a week. You're going to have more traffic. Also, the subject property is the lowest property in the area. And in order to develop that, it appears to me that they're going to have to do some serious work on the height of the ground, and then that gives me concern about the riparian rights on my property. If we go from a B3 to an I2, there's absolutely no discussion that it's going to reduce the value of my property, which is a governmental taking of private property. And I'm curious, is the agreement between the village and the school board available to the public, or is that a private agreement?
I can answer that piece. That's available for public inspection upon request at the village office. A proposed agreement between the village and NEEP and Morton Reynolds for the development of this site. Agreement between the village and the school district will be available in the future on or around July 6th for inspection from the village office.
Okay, so the next meeting is on July 6th, though, so there would be no ability for me to view that agreement before the next meeting?
It would be a part of the agenda packet for the July 6th meeting, so it would be available nearer the meeting time. Agenda packets are usually finalized by the Thursday or Friday before.
Okay, well, those are my concerns. For the life of me, I can't understand what is going on here, and frankly, without wanting to get too far up in the weeds, I have had discussions with District 709 on more than one occasion, and I have yet to receive a straight or accurate answer about anything on any topic, and I find that disconcerting.
John, I appreciate the comments. Obviously with any process where our table is involved, we're involved in the zoning portion only. We're not privy to the agreements outside, but certainly, as Councilor McGrath said, once that agenda is available, I would suggest you reach out to trustees and make certain that you feel more comfortable with whatever the process is.
Okay. Well, that's about it for me then. Again, I struggled with this thing tonight. Our hookup the first time didn't work. I had to reconnect. And so.
Well, we appreciate you. No, that's fine. I appreciate you sticking on till the end. I hated it that we missed you and you had to circle back because there was a lot of public comment, but thank you for holding tight.
Well, trust me, when I tried to talk and it didn't work, you have no idea the level of panic on my end.
I think I have a smidgen of an understanding.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Justin. I'm done.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're going to head back now to public comments. I see a hand raised here. Andy, when I go ahead and state your name and address, and then we'll swear you in, and please also reference which of the public hearing items you are wanting to discuss, if you would. That would be Andy Hoffman.
Newbury Court, and I don't have the number in front of me, but it's the 33-acre development.
Gotcha. That would be case number 20-04ZA. Thank you very much. We'll swear you in now if you can get with Mr. McGrath.
You can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Andy Hoffman,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony that I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Couple quick questions. Thank you for hearing me, first of all. Is there a proposed stoplight on Idlewood?
We as a commission are unaware of one. This would be something that the village could speak more to. I believe Idlewood is currently considered a collector street, and as such, I'm not certain what the parameters of traffic lighting are. I know the opportunity there is something that would be reviewed probably by Craig Loudermilk, but this commission is unaware of one.
Okay. I asked, it was in some of the literature handed out by Ethos. There was a picture of one in the corner. Can I ask when this was first presented to the board, the development?
To this commission, the development was with the zoning packet that we received, which is roughly the same time that the public notification goes out. We saw the original plan, which obviously varied dramatically from what we're reviewing here this evening. And then we have been receiving, I would say, updates over time as the plan evolved up until what we saw this evening with you guys.
Okay. I really just have a statement voicing my opinion. If someone wants to comment on it, that's fine. But I just felt with where I live and the proximity to the potential development, I felt like I should share my and my family's opinion. And I am very concerned with the large amount of tenants, rental tenants for that piece of property. Specifically them being not homeowners, but rental leasing families and individuals. I feel this development overall steals from the hard work and the money, and that the homeowners, that the local people of Morton, the teachers, the business owners, it steals from what they've developed in this area. I feel that we've worked hard to make our area what it is, and I feel that it just opens the door for some people to make some money. It definitely hurts the rental homes in the area. There's a lot of business people in the area that have rental homes. I have rental homes in the area. And I think that's gonna hurt the amount of applicants for those. So that's a citywide problem. I sincerely doubt that the literally hundreds of units being developed will ever come to full potential. I feel that this is the developer's dream, having single family homes 12 foot from each other. I think that it's going to get started. I think that you'll get your roads in, and I think that you'll get some of the buildings up, and you might even get some single family homes up, and I think that it's going to slow down. Bloomington is currently experiencing this. I should reference I'm in the residential construction field and have been for 20 years. And I deal with general contractors, builders, and realtors on a daily basis. Bloomington is experiencing a very large slowdown. I believe that Mr. Lehman is experiencing some speed bumps on one of his developments in Mohammed that is very similar to this. It is more of the condo and apartment style, but it's a large amount of people being introduced into a smaller community, and it flooded it. So keep in mind that there's this 33 acres. There's already been some on Missouri. He's proposing, I don't think the number ever got totally discussed, but 2 other buildings, 40 units, and so on and so on and so on. I would like the board to postpone their vote due to the short notice, the unclarity still, so that the residents can be properly informed. And I guess I just want to just literally say that I disapprove of the development. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I appreciate the thoughts, and I understand that there's some concerns over this that probably go beyond the scope of the zoning, but I think it's worth listening and hearing some of that. I'm looking up at the participation list now, and I'm looking for anyone with hands up. I don't see anyone, so just want to give a minute here to cycle through, give the public an opportunity to either raise hands.
Justin.
Yes. Yep.
Marie Fisk here. I think we have an individual and he doesn't realize he has to click on where it says raise hand. And it's Rick. If you see him up, Rick Britton, he's raising his hand. I see him in the video.
Okay. So Rick, if you want to go ahead and state your name and address. Thank you, Marie. And Mr. Britton, we will swear you in if you would like to do testimony.
Okay. I'm Rick Britton, 381 East Maywood Street.
Mr. Britton, if you could repeat after me, please. I state your name.
I, Rick Britton,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I am about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'd like to address this to Mr. Lehman, and that is for the single family homes that he's discussed tonight. Does he plan to have those lots conform to the current R1 zoning standard?
Actually,
go for it, Pat.
Yeah, that overlaps with village procedures. So nothing in the request tonight would approve any less than complete compliance with the requirements of R1 zoning in the village for the R1 portions of Mr. Lehman's development. I understand there's a natural overlap in the discussion between the two. Any relaxation of those otherwise ordinary requirements in connection with this contemplated planned residential development would come back before this very commission for a subsequent public hearing.
Okay.
But based on what's before the Plan Commission tonight, if they recommend approval and the village board approves, it does not in any way relax the ordinary lot size and setback requirements and the like in the R1 zoning district for this property.
Okay. And also to clarify, because I may not have caught it, where are the entrances into this development?
Yeah, happy to show that. We'll put that on the screen here. Hoping you can see. And yeah, so what we've got on the screen here shows 2 entrances. Keep in mind the top of your screen is actually the south portion of the property. Bottom of the screen is the north portion. On the bottom you have Idlewood, and on the right-hand side you have Fourth. We have 2 entrances, one on each of those 2 streets, and we are pushing them back further away from the intersection. We don't have anything to do with street signage or traffic lights. That's not our territory, but it will be coordinated with the village and those who are in authority of it, with the police and all that. But there are only those 2 entrances and exits so that you have a real controlled flow.
Okay, so currently, as you go down South 4th, there is pavement going into the 33 acres at Maywood. Is that what you envision using as the southernmost entrance?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. And then the other thing I'd like to submit to the planning committee, and that is hopefully tonight, based on the input that you've heard, that as Melinda Fuller mentioned, that we will have a public hearing to be able to go through this. Certainly, a Zoom meeting during COVID, in my estimation, is not the appropriate way to handle this subject. And hopefully the committee and Mr. McGrath recognize that.
Well, I guess if that's a question, I would say we understand it's not ideal, but there are a number of things that we're all having to deal with under these circumstances that are less than ideal. And I do understand the concerns the public has over this. I will say, under the current plan, I know it's been mentioned before, but if Mr. Lehman determines, if he gets approval here, there's still another step. He has to get approval from the trustees. Even then, under this new revised plan, he would do a planned residential development plan in conjunction or coordination with the village engineers. And then another agenda would be posted later on in the future. And my sincere hope would be that at that time, we either have figured out a way to do this with social distancing in a larger environment. I'm with you, Mr. Britton. I would love to be done with the Zoom meetings, but unfortunately, you know, development is one of those things. Time kills deals, and so a developer isn't going to wait necessarily. And I don't think it's anything that he can control. And the village, I think, is still acting under the presumption of safety for all of its parties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like we've got a few other participants who have raised hands. I will ask the participants now, if possible, let's try not to retread too much territory if we've already discussed things, as it is getting kind of late in the hour. First off, we're going to, it just says Dan. So Dan, if that's you, please state your full name, address, and then we will swear you in.
Dan Acton, 388 East Maywood Street. Dan, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Dan Acton,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
that the testimony I'm about to give in this proceeding
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to thank the Planning Commission for their service to the village of Morton. My concerns and my wife, we're within the 250 feet. Is safety due to the density of the development and the fact that we don't want to see the character of the neighborhood changed. We've got Greenview Estates, Summerfield, and Southwick. And I'd ask that the planning board delay, as we just heard about tonight, the planned residential development. I'd like to make sure we explore that more and understand what that means to us as residents of Morton. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. It looks like the next participant that I show is Rust B, R-U-S-S-E-D, the letter B. If that is you, please state your full name, address, and then we can swear you in. The current hand raised is R-U-S-S-E-D, B. If you're there, please go ahead and state your full name. Okay, so moving on, is there anyone else from the public who we have missed, whom either is unable to select the raised hand or who anyone sees in the gallery view is requesting an opportunity to speak? I'm going to provide us about 15, 20 seconds here to look through these screens. Okay. With that in mind, I would ask that we close the public comment portion so that the Planning Commission table can now address the petitioners directly with questions, comments, and then an eventual vote. Pat, is there anything else that's needed prior to saying goodbye to the public participation?
No, and the public is welcome to remain here in the meeting to observe. It's just at this juncture forward, the opportunity for the public to engage in the discussion, to provide comment, further testimony, or cross-examination is ended. I would suggest, Your Honor, before you proceed, that we may allow a moment or two for our Zoom meeting administrator to kind of forcibly from the administrative side put our members of the public on mute, just to preserve that termination of the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting.
Absolutely.
Probably that process started before I started talking, but we could just allow a minute or two for that to happen, and then I would suggest it'd be appropriate to proceed.
You bet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin again with public hearings. I will state each case, and then Planning Commission, it's our turn now as the table to discuss questions directly with petitioners. And then eventually, when ready, we would require either a motion on each of these cases. So we'll start off with case number 2002. Again, this is the property change from R2 to R4. Petitioner is Steve Lehman. This is a property with a Queenwood address and a separate entrance. Questions from the table to the petitioner?
I don't know if this is necessarily a question to the petitioner, but I do feel that a 3-story apartment dwelling would not be appropriate for that space, especially, when people buy their residences, if they're looking at the zoning around them, I feel like it's not always fair to change that zoning into something that's going to impact their lives and their home. So this is a question probably for Pat. So can we make a recommendation, or are we able to make a recommendation with the requirement that it is not allowed to be a 3-story?
You can include conditions on your recommendation. One other kind of procedural note, and this is kind of a recently evolving thought, but it's my anticipation that at your next meeting, there will likely be an ordinance for a public hearing presented, which would make 3 or 3.5 story apartment buildings a special use in R4. Based on some of the feedback we've got through these 2 cases, I've had some consultation with the mayor and with Brad Marks, and I think there's probably at least some receptive ears on the administrative side to address that issue with some code cleanup. So yes, you can impose conditions on your recommendation, but I would also suggest there may be an ordinance change before you for public hearing next month, which is also responsive to your concern.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for that, Pat. And Kara, that's a good point. So just real quick, petitioner Steve, as we talk about this, Counselor just suggested that an ordinance change may be inbound as quickly as next month's meeting, which would suggest that the limitation on height would not need to be something we propose and tie to this, which then the trustees would have to address as well. And would that hurt your timeline? As far as this property in particular, not discussing the second property at this point, but the one off of Queenwood, would that additional 30 days prior to zoning cause undue harm for you with regard to the potential for your development?
Clarification, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest that Mr. Lehman's, unless the board elected to table it, that the ordinance I just suggested, unless you choose to table this, wouldn't necessarily have bearing on the speed at which you proceed, unless you're asking the question in connection with possibly tabling.
Correct. Basically, I want to, if Steve's timeline, if Mr. Lehman's timeline is such that a 30, 60, maybe even 90-day delay would cause undue harm, it would be better for us to go ahead and discuss this resolution with some adjustments.
Yeah.
Steve, where are you at with that? That sounds like a yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through. So on, because yeah, it does impact the design. We've already got a lot of work in the design for buildings. I don't want to have to redo that because it's inefficient to type things, as you know.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if we could just on you're specifically talking about Queenwood here, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, if we wanted to put a stipulation in there that says it's a 2-story and only 20 to 44 units, whatever you come up with there, then I would probably prefer that rather than leaving it open-ended and delaying progress.
Yep. Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Kara. Any other questions from the table this evening for the petitioner regarding case number 20-02, R2 to R4?
I have a follow-up question to Kara's question, because it's not only the height or how many stories the building is, but we've also discussed things like the location of the buildings, the density. And so I just kind of maybe not a question for the petitioner, but just maybe for Pat or maybe someone else that knows the answer. When we're changing the zoning, shouldn't we be doing this with the idea that the developer could change next month, but the zoning that we changed it to will remain changed, and the design could change? And so I just worry about these kind of the verbal commitments that we're making regarding to a zoning change when, correct me if I'm wrong, the designer could change, the property could change hands, but the zoning, if we changed it, will remain that way.
Yeah, I agree with Craig. I guess, and he kind of touched on this with the density. So if it stays an R2, and I don't know the numbers of the density off my top of my head, but so I think it's 2.29 acres. So if it stayed an R2, how many units would that be? And I do really appreciate that Steve is not maximizing, or his current plan is not to maximize that space. But I would be interested in knowing the comparison of numbers between if it was R2 and fully utilized and compared with the number that Steve is planning on doing with the R4. And I don't know who that question is even directed at.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would go to Steve as well as this table. So R2 is a dramatically different zoning classification than R4 and would require a lot more properties to be built. And I don't know what the density maximum is because we'd have to take a look at that as a completely separate plan. But it sounds to me like the question really is how can we control future use if this zoning shifts to R4 and Mr. Lehman were to sell this property at a future date or even prior to construction? How is this table able to confirm that that what he says he's going to build is in fact what he's going to build? And Pat, if I'm correct in this, by putting stipulations in there, those stipulations, our recommendation then with those stipulations to the trustees would in turn become a development agreement that would bind. Is that correct?
Yes. Fundamentally, if rezoning is made subject to conditions, a developer would have to comply with those conditions in order to develop the site. So yes.
Does that answer that one, Kara, a little bit better?
Yeah.
Or Craig?
One more clarification. So for instance, Steve had mentioned maybe limiting it to, and I don't want to put a number in his mouth, and I kind of forgot, but I think it was 20 units potentially. And I don't know if that was per building or total, but so whatever that magic number is. So let's say we put that number in there, Steve builds it according to plan. At that point, could somebody buy it and then put another one in there? Or does that limit stay with the zone?
At that point in time, when they pull a permit for this, they will see that they are already at their maximum density.
Okay.
Doubling back to Craig's point that you jumped on, fundamentally your role is evaluating land use and whether R4 is the appropriate zoning classification for this property. It's a bit of a trap to fall into while Mr. Langman has a project that is the impetus behind the requested zoning change. I do agree with the concept with my suggestion to you that your role is primarily to evaluate whether R4 is an appropriate zoning classification for this property. And I would caution against using conditions on the rezoning intending to say we just approved this project and not what the future, not any other R4 type uses for the property, because you're really not. This isn't a special use scenario. This is a rezoning, and I would suggest that the overall thought process of is R4 appropriate in this particular lot is the guiding question presented to you, as opposed to whether Mr. Lehman's specific proposed development is appropriate for this lot.
Okay. But in regards to the height, since we assume that is going to become a additional requirement in the near future, it would be acceptable to put that into the request.
Yeah, that if you were to make that a condition on your recommendation, I wouldn't find that to be inappropriate.
Okay.
And again, if ordinance is before you next month, and if that meets with your approval and the board's, then that condition becomes moot, as future development would be evaluated under the merits of the ordinance that exists at the time the building permit and development is sought.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you both, Kara and Craig. Any other questions from the table? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion on petition number 20-02ZA?
I make a motion to approve petition 20-02ZA with a clarification or a condition that it must be no more than 2 stories.
Okay, so we have on the table a agreement that case number 20-02 is conditionally approved with 2-story height limitations. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion to approve with 2-story stipulation.
Okay.
Got
Motion
one
is made and
question,
second.
Justin. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, of course. We've got a motion on the table and it's seconded, FYI.
Yes, and I guess I'm just curious about the density factor. We've heard 20 units, we heard 18 to 24. If we're going to put a condition, I would think we'd want to condition the maximum density, be that number 20 or 24. We're protecting the height, but we're not protecting the density.
Yeah.
I don't want to, you know, obviously I don't want to step in front of the table entirely, but I do want to make sure we're aware. Pat mentioned it, and I always have to kind of bring us around. We want to make sure that we don't overstep as well. We don't want to become public engineers. We don't want to become the people who make these determinations. Now, obviously, if you feel strongly then that's what we should do. In the case of what Kara has suggested here, as Mr. McGrath mentioned, there is an ordinance in bound already that sort of handles that under the special use, which would bring that type of stipulation to the board anyway. So in the case of restrictions, it kind of makes sense that we're just getting ahead of that to not delay a developer. When we start adding additional conditions, it does start to maybe overstep into the Village of Morton's oversight process a little bit. But, you know, again, I don't want to overstep and tell anyone here how to propose these. I just want to make sure we don't get unnecessarily fussy in our commitments, because we really are land use and land use only. And I think because there have been there's been so much good public feedback on this, of course, at these tables, we want to help, right? We want to make everybody feel comfortable with this community. But the challenge is that's also the village's job. And there are checks and balances in place under the permit review process and the site review process that will put some of that stuff in play. So anyhow, I just want to make that statement before we either amend or pull that back off the table and put a new proposal up.
Well, I guess I feel like Steve made a promise that it was going to be no more than 20. I think we could, without hesitation, add that to the motion.
So Pat, procedurally, do we, in order to amend the existing motion and get it seconded, what would be the correct process?
2 options. One, friendly amendment could be adopted by the movement and the party who seconded the motion. Alternative would be for either of the individuals who've indicated support to make a motion to amend the original action and get a second on that. Then we would vote an amendment to the action, and then if the amendment passes, then we vote again on approving the amended action. So I would start to help guide that process by asking the movement and the party who seconded if they would accept the proposal as a friendly amendment and adopt that into their motion.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
I accept.
Okay. So since it was the movement and the party who seconded accept that as a friendly amendment, and the action before you has 2 conditions imposed on a rezoning, which is no greater than 2 stories and no more than 20 units, I believe was stated. So
I'm going to weigh in here real quick, Justin. And I've done a lot of rezonings and that type of stuff, and I've never seen conditions attached to a rezoning. I don't know if we can do that, honestly, Pat, and maybe you have a different opinion, but as far as I know, you can't attach conditions to a rezoning. So I understand maybe having that as a possible condition, knowing that the amendment might come forward to make a change to the height, but the density requirement, I mean, it's allowed per zoning right now. So I'll vote no against that one, just on the basis that I don't think we can do it, but I'd welcome your opinion.
It's certainly atypical. Conditions are more common in special uses as opposed to rezoning. I would concur with Mr. Fick's thoughts in that regard. Going back to the premise in general terms that you're approving the change in land use as opposed to the specific development. The question as to whether there's anything in your code that permits it, we often have rezonings that have a condition precedent that would have to be met, like title changing hands, which is a proposed condition precedent to the second rezoning that's before you tonight. So it's not entirely foreign, though it is pretty unusual to do it in the way that's been proposed here. I would concur with that analysis.
So with clarity from the table on this current advisement that's put on the table and seconded, are we ready to vote? I mean, we're on a second, so unless anyone else has a comment, I think we're calling for a vote.
No, we need discussion, right?
I'm sorry.
A motion, a second, then discussion.
Go ahead.
So I just have a couple things to say about it. And it kind of pertains not just to this one, but maybe another one we're going to vote on tonight. And I just want to kind of give you a sense of kind of where I stand on these things. I'm sensitive to landowners and those that have invested in our community over time, and sometimes they own vacant properties, sometimes they're vacant buildings. And I'm sensitive to the fact that one day they need to realize their investment, and the fact that there are neighbors that live around them that would prefer that they didn't, that they prefer that the land stay vacant, that there not be something built on it. So I want to say on one hand that I'm sensitive to the landowners and what their investment in our community means. But on the other hand, I think zoning is a commitment to those neighbors of that property. That's kind of an indication of this is what it could become someday. And this is fair warning to whoever moves in around the vacant property. This is what it can become. And so they really don't have a complaint if the development matches the zoning that was always there. So that's kind of that's where I'm coming from when I'm voting on these things, is when I see an impact to homeowners, I think, did we give them fair warning before they bought their properties, or did we not? So I just kind of want to let you know that's where I stand on it. I see zoning as kind of a commitment to the neighborhood of what it could become someday. And no, people aren't going to be happy when things get developed. My home was in the middle of a cornfield some years ago, and somebody probably wasn't happy that it was being developed at that time. So I just want to state my opinion and kind of my perspective on these matters. They're tough, and I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Craig.
I'd like to make a little comment on it as well. I think we're getting too deep in the weeds here by attaching too many conditions on rezoning. Rezoning has to be limited to the ordinance that's before us. When we start trying to rewrite the ordinance in a specific zoning case, I think we're getting in deep weeds here, and we're not being fair to the landowners, as Craig talked about. We're also not being fair to the other residents. So I would vote against this motion with all those conditions in it.
Thank you, Mr. Ritterbusch.
Well, I want to chime in just on what Jerry just said. At this table, we're not experts on all the different possible things that we should be thinking about. I mean, we're thinking about density and location and building heights, but there could be 5 other things that we're not thinking of. And so I don't know if we're in a position really to pick through and do that. I don't want to be a deal breaker either, but that's one of my concerns. I think it's getting very complicated for what our purpose is.
after Mr. Fick's comment, I had the opportunity to pull up your zoning ordinance to see if the ordinance reserves to you the right to impose conditions on a zoning amendment. The ordinance does reserve the right to impose conditions on special use. It does not reserve the right for you to impose conditions on a zoning amendment. So my opinion, walking back on a statement I may have made before, having had additional opportunity to review your code, it's my opinion that you have to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down to what's been requested without imposing conditions specific to the project. So I apologize for any confusion, but I appreciate the feedback from the table, and I appreciate having had a moment to further review your code. Fundamentally, your code provides guideposts in what you should do, and having in one section of procedure a reservation, the ability to impose conditions, and not having it in another section, to me, sets forth a conclusion that that omission was willful, and therefore you're without that ability to impose conditions. So I would suggest the motion either is in favor of or opposed to rezoning without any special conditions attached. Beyond,
Are the existing motions then removed?
I would
rewind.
Yeah, I would suggest we need to rewind and get back to a motion that is specific to the request and that is not conditioned.
Okay, then going back to discussion, I don't really feel comfortable approving an amendment, approving the zoning change with it potentially being allowed to be a 3-story. So I personally would prefer to postpone until we have, changed that to become a special use.
Can I ask Steve if he's willing to redo this? If we postpone it, is he willing to work with the community and come back with a proposal that's only 2-story and maybe moves it over? And
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Chad. Yeah, because I think our intent lines up with what you're asking for, what we communicated, and if there's some legality to where you can't impose restrictions, I get that. I still would, I'd be open to considering it for the next round, basically. I would, rather than getting a no in this situation, I would definitely rather get a, first that means we would go back to reapply, I suppose, or table it. But yeah, I mean, my intent is to do the 2 stories, to do everything that we just communicated, the 20 unit max. So whatever way we can do that, I'm open to.
yeah, I just prefer not to approve something that, there's so much information kind of coming in kind of last minute. I actually don't know that I have all the right materials, and I wouldn't want to approve anything that I wasn't actually written down and portrayed correctly. So. And I definitely, it would be a no for me if it was if it wasn't listening to the community and the neighbors.
So I have a question in addition then. If we can't put any conditions on it, that means we're just carte blanche. And I guess this is the way it should be. This is about zoning, not about Steve's development. Mm-hmm. So what we're actually approving zoning, we're not approving a development.
That's correct. And that's one of the things we get into.
And so regardless of what Steve says he will do, which I don't distrust that he will do what he said he'll do, we can approve this, and then Steve could sell the property, or someone else could buy the property, and they could do R4 to the maximum extent of the zoning ordinance, right, on that piece of property without a public hearing.
That's correct. Once the zoning's in place, there is no public hearing. They can just pull a permit and go with city review.
Okay.
I have a question on that. Yeah, once you're ready to hand it off, Jeff, I have a couple questions on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so on South Missouri, for example, we acquired some properties. There were lots that were from Don Schrock and Beckendorf and actually from Zobrist here. And those properties then had, I think they were zoned R4, but they had some agreement to where there'd be a maximum of 8 units per lot. And I don't know if that was a stipulation that was added to the zone or if that was some sort of a private agreement. But I wonder how that relates to what we're talking about now. Is there another way around this to still get stipulations in place that we can all be happy with?
That actually was a unusual and quite different circumstance, I believe, and I had cause to review that some time ago, back before you began development there. I believe that those were included as a part of a pre-annexation agreement. And since this land is already annexed to the village, that wouldn't be a mechanism we could use to impose restrictions of a similar nature as was in place on South Missouri.
Okay, well, that's
A clarifying question for Brad here. In our zoning packet here, the R3, am I understanding when you talked briefly earlier about the existing R3 that used to be on the next parcel, and that's no longer, it got rolled into R4, what we call R4 today. Is that R3 zoning still available for Steve to then pursue in that avenue if we don't vote on the R4? I think that as far as the way it was written with the height and stuff, it's kind of matching the height requirements like the restrictions we were looking at putting on.
R3 is a zoning classification that would be 3 and 4 unit buildings.
So that'd be a little.
R4 is multifamily. R3 is 3 and 4.
Yeah, so that's smaller than what Steve is looking at.
Yes.
But that might be a good idea. Is it possible to go to an R3 and then that limits, obviously that limits the density, but if I can still do 4 units and do 3 buildings that are 4 units each or something like that, is that something that can help and find a happy medium?
I would have to do the math, but I think you're going to be restricted too deeply on that, Steve. I think if you're trying to keep with a 20-unit development, your best bet here is, in fact, to allow for the R4. And if again, speaking for the table, if the table's concern is the height requirement, then that will make that concern moot once the ordinance is potentially changed coming before both this board as well as, this table as well as the trustees. Once that gets adopted, then your R4 could come back before us and go back before the trustees, and it would have that stipulation included in it already. I'm, again, timing being what it is, if it's that or a no, that's probably going to be your best bet.
And regarding the timing on that, Justin, we can put both of those in the same meeting, correct? Like we could approve that it would become
Certainly.
a special use, and then
we could. Yep, and then it would go before the trustees, and they would do the same. Any other comments here from the table?
We're going to table. Well, since Craig went ahead and put his position out there, and I kind of confused now if we're just talking about one of the properties or both of them, but I really do think the fairest thing to do, if we can't start adding conditions and stuff, is just to leave the zoning as is. The variance is just that. It's an exception, a special exception. The developer is the one who is willingly coming into this. They can control their risk. The people who already live around it, they can't. They're being acted upon. That they don't have a choice in the matter, right? So really, they should be given the benefit of the doubt if they feel like there's risk to their property value and things like that. So I think the developer needs to work with the community. Steve needs to work with like he's trying to. I think he needs to work with them to come up with a plan that they can buy into. So that requires trust and confidence be built. It's if it really is an all or nothing, it becomes a no for me.
And so just to clarify, we are only going to be currently discussing case number 20-02, which is the R2 to R4. We'll get into the other one after. We've got 2 more to do after this. And I want to try to keep those comments, separated only because they are such dramatically different. Okay, any other commentary regarding this case number? It sounds to me like the table is leaning towards tabling this, but if there is further conversation that we need to have.
Farce, right?
Yes. I'm
We
sorry.
have yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. I lost track of where we are here.
Case number is 20-02. You're in good shape. We're still waiting for the table to make a motion.
We have a motion on the table that I've suggested we would need to amend if you wanted to act on that motion. Been discussion of tabling this pending the public hearing and potential positive recommendation on an ordinance change at your next meeting. But I'd suggest if you intend to table it, or if there is a movement who wants to make that motion and somebody wants to second it, that would be a priority action, which would be voted upon first before the underlying. So if anyone wants to table it, not to tell you what to do, but it would be appropriate to make that motion.
Thank you, Pat.
I'll move to table.
Second.
Brad, we have a motion and a second for tabling the public hearing case number 20-02.
I'll call the roll. Keach,
Yes.
Knapp,
Yes.
Fick,
Yes.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Guile,
Yes.
DeWeese,
Yes.
Zobrist,
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on, we're on to case number 20-3. Again, this is the 17.33 acre property. Currently zoning change from B3 to I2 is what the request from the Village of Morton is. If poor Mr. Laudermilk is still awake, he is the petitioner and he can speak to any questions that this table may have. Are there any questions regarding case number 20-3? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve case number 20-03ZA.
Ritterbusch has made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Zobrist. You can call when ready, Brad.
Knapp,
Yes.
Fick,
Yes.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Smock,
I'm abstaining as an employee of the school district.
Guile,
Yes.
DeWeese,
Yes.
Zobrist,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Keach.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay, thank you. Now we're moving on to the big one, case number 20-4ZA. This is the 33.88 acre property that we heard a considerable amount of public discourse on this evening. Before we talked, before the table talks, I do want to point out just one sort of counterpoint, and I just want everyone to understand this kind of deep down. The proposed changes are significant, and I recognize a lot of notice or a lot of comments from the public that the lack of clarity is concerning to them, and that they were worried and they want more time. But I also just want to point something out, and this kind of ties into Craig, what you were talking about here just not too long ago. There is an existing tract of R4 land. The only reason I point that out is I want any of the public who are still here, it looks like we still have 72 people. I want this table and the developer to recognize we do have to understand that this zoning exists. And so if a developer, whether it be Mr. Lehman or anyone, came in and purchased this today or yesterday, if it wasn't going through this sort of public conversation, if he wasn't requesting, originally it was a zoning change that was pretty significant, the whole thing going to R4. Now it's been scaled back significantly to what looks like a fairly decent attempt to deal with some of the challenges. The issue is this: if this developer were to go away, or if this were to be denied, there is a chance that this developer or another developer could just go ahead and build maximum load of density and all they would have to do is go before the city to get a permit. They would not need to have public discourse. And I just want to make sure this table is recognizing that fact, because a no vote here could in fact force that hand as well. So as we discuss this, let's bear some of those facts in mind.
Hey, Justin, before further discussion, there was a gentleman, RUSSEDB, who you called on, and there was some technological issues. He wasn't muted by the administrator, but he wasn't able to speak at that time. He provided a comment in the Zoom chat, and I just want to read that into the record. And this should be taken by the Plan Commission as a substitute for sworn testimony under the circumstances. So Tom Russell, 346 Idlewood, stated as follows: I want to address the traffic on Idlewood. Not only are cars speeding down the street, but so are Grimm's area PDC, UPS, USPS, FedEx speeding too. There have been 2 significant accidents in front of our home. Lastly, the homes in the new development along Idlewood and 4th will look like row houses. I ask that the vote for the zoning change on this property be tabled till it can be reviewed by those affected and until an in-person meeting can be held. Thank you. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Pat. Yeah, I missed the chat. There's a lot to track here. Yeah, so, and again, that echoes public conversation that we heard again, time and again, right? The traffic is a concern, safety is a concern. Again, with this table, we deal with zoning and zoning only. And I think it's important that we pay attention to not getting too tied into the weeds, as we already have a little bit. We don't get to determine how those traffic patterns are. We can take it into consideration, but in this instance, dramatically different than case number 20-2, the request here is sort of a sliding of existing zoning, keeping it within the same density. So with all that in mind, let's have some conversation from the table to the petitioner.
I have a question about that, because these are 2 different parcels. How is it that you can lay it out? Like, how do you lay this out?
Well, are you talking specifically between the R1, where the R1 ends and the R4 would begin?
Like, you're moving a piece of R4 into a different place.
Correct. So that would happen under the planned residential development agreement. So it gets confusing, Craig, and I totally understand, because this is something that I don't think this table's dealt with in a while. So the planned residential development process adds another layer of community oversight and specifically village oversight. We are here to look at the zoning request. It's been downgraded to one based on density. The PRD, the Planned Residential Development Agreement, that would potentially come out of an approval, not just at this table, but then specifically approval from the trustees next week. A PRD would then be developed between Steve Lehman, the developer, as well as the village of Morton. In that PRD, all of those types of questions regarding specifically where this stuff will go, other questions, where's the water detention, how, infrastructure, access, ingress, egress, all of the bits and pieces that really will make up the formative development agreement will then come out of those discussions in those meetings. At that time, when a final agreement is agreed to both by, I assume, Craig Loudermilk and then the developer, that development would then come before this board for review again, and then it would go before the trustees for final approval. Pat, step in if I botched any of that.
You're good.
Could I say that actually, am I right when I say that the planned residential development has nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight?
Similar to the discussion 2 cases ago, planned residential development is not before you, and if you approve tonight, you're making a zoning change that has bearing on future land use, but you're not approving or even speaking to a planned development. You're only approving, if you were to recommending approval, if you were to do so, the relocation of that R4. So yes, I agree with your statement.
Going back to Craig's question, are these indeed 2 parcels of land, or is this one parcel of land that has 2 zoning
This is one parcel of land with 2 zoning classifications.
Okay. And so any future subdivision, if we would approve this tonight, this L-shaped R4 and the rest of it being R1, any future subdivision would have to conform to that zoning that we are talking about tonight.
That's correct.
Okay. And so just ask a few more, while I've got the floor. So the property as it sits today has already zoned R1 and R4, and there is no public hearing required to develop that land as it is zoned. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, and just to repeat what you said, Justin, that R4 parcel could be developed to its full density as allowed by our zoning ordinance as it stands today, and it fronts right on 4th Street as it stands today.
That's correct as well.
And the petitioner is actually proposing to move that zoning away from 4th Street, and so that the R4, instead of being right across the street from an R1, would be bordering on is it B1 or B2 that's right south of it?
B1.
That is B1, yeah. You're talking about the medical complex and Pat's office.
By the way, I don't think that was ever mentioned tonight, is that the medical complex, that field behind it is B1. That's a business zoning.
That's correct.
And so the new proposed R4 would be adjacent to B1 and another R4, and not adjacent to any R1. Is that correct?
The only R1 it would be adjacent to is the remaining R1 in the existing plat.
Yes, which is controlled by the owner.
Correct.
Okay.
So back to my question, I'm figuring out, how do you word this so that there's no increase in the amount of R4, or how do you word it to say that you're taking a piece from over here and putting it over there?
Well, the approval is, and Pat, speak to this if I mess this up. The approval is, in fact, for a zoning change of whatever that turns out to be, 3 acres, I think, of existing R1 shifting to R4, and 3 acres of existing R4 shifting to R1.
And all the details get worked out later when we approve the specific plan.
Well, the details of the rezoning are fixed by final board action on this. I don't have before me every submittal that Mr. Lehman has provided to you, and I don't know if Mr. Lehman can speak to this, but there should be a dimension set forth of how much R4 is going to be removed. He's requesting to be removed from the west part of this and relocated to the east boundary line of this property. I don't know, Steve, do you have that information handy, or was that in the handout the board received?
Yeah, it's kind of both. I should have emailed it to you, Pat, but yeah, the board should have that. It's about page 12, basically. Gives you some widths and lengths and total acreage that we're talking about moving. Yes, there we go. Yeah, there are dimensions. We're talking about a strip that it's also on another page, page 9. It talks about a piece of land that's 192 feet width by 374 length. And that equivalent piece and even the same dimensions are, we're asking it to be relocated over there. But that slide number 9 that's on the screen gives the intent, and we can hammer out very specific dimensions and all that with our civil engineer.
So if you were to make a positive recommendation on what the petitioners requested, what Steve just showed you is what you'd be recommending.
Right.
Does that answer the question for you, Jeff, as far as how this procedure goes on? We're essentially not changing any. There's no stipulations in here. Even the potential for a PRD is a future item. What we would be voting on right now is, hey, this existing R4 is just shifting.
So, this may not be something that the neighbors want to hear, but this zoning that we already have in Morton right now creates all of the problems that they have listed, which include traffic problems, school crowding, property values changing. Those things are with us today with the current zoning. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely correct. That's one of the things I wanted to open the meeting with, because I fear that the public was potentially unaware of that.
Can I ask, because it's all one parcel, are they able to put stormwater retention and parking for the R4 on the R1? Is that, they wouldn't have to jam all of the parking and circulation and, stormwater onto the R4 part of the parcel for the high density?
Stormwater, in my opinion, could be located outside of the R4. The parking, I think, would need to be located within R4 if they developed under its current arrangement, if only because a parking lot, and I understand it's on the same parcel, but you get into accessory uses, and the parking lot can be accessory to R4, but it needs to be on R4 to be accessory to it. So yes and no. Stormwater is not unusual within the village for that to serve multiple properties or improvements. It's not inconsistent with R1 use, but the parking, I think, would need to be, in my opinion, would need to be, if developed without any zoning change, would need to be located within the R4 parameters.
Okay. So then if you overlay setbacks and things onto top of that, that reduces the amount of, units that can be put onto that R4. So I'm not so sure. It's not completely clear to me that the threat of, a lot of R4 development in this narrow piece is really true, which might make it more likely that a future developer would actually go make R4 R1 rather than, move it around, which would be in line with what the public or the neighbors would prefer. So anyway, I'm not sure that it's likely that it would get developed as an R4.
Well, I want to speak to that quickly, and I'm losing some of my power, so hopefully you guys can still hear me on my headphones. But we have a petitioner here that's already said that they're willing to develop this. So we do need to be aware of that. Well,
did he say he was willing to develop it this way, or did he just show us what it could look like if someone did?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the property to improve the property, and we're looking at the highest and best usage of that. That's why we've opened up the dialogue to try to get what we feel like would be an improvement, which is giving it some shape and curvature and spreading out the density. So yeah, it's ready. It's currently approved, and it will be developed by someone. That's why we've gone to the community and yourselves to discuss a way to further improve the property.
Steve, are you willing to continue working with the community? I mean, I know they voiced that it's been kind of rushed, and there's some not complete understanding on what you're proposing to do, or at least the latest. Are you still willing to continue to work with them and try to come up with something?
Yeah, I mean, from day one, we have always been open doors to the community, to input, to sharing information, giving them handouts, posting it on a public forum, receiving input, having our offices open house all day Friday, all day today. We've had hundreds of conversations with the public and the neighbors, and it's been an open door policy for quite some time. So that's been our approach. And so we absolutely have been willing and doing that. We spent a lot of time doing that, and we've appreciated the feedback. So the answer is yes, for sure. Time is of the essence, and that's why we came here to get an approval on this, is because we do, time is of the essence to improve the property. And that's why we shared the idea.
If I can just jump in, concurring with what others have said, if we were just looking at this as we're supposed to be from a zoning issue, it would seem to me, even from all the input we've had, we're only improving a situation that maybe nobody's thrilled with, that there's R4 over there. But we're getting R4 now off of 4th Street. We're getting R4 not being across the street from existing R1. So I only see that we're improving the property. It's a multi-step process for him to come to full development of this property. We're getting another chance to look at this when they come back with the PRD. We have to just deal with what we've got in front of us tonight, and I see it as an improvement of moving that R4 away from 4th Street.
I certainly agree with Phil that we're making an improvement. What we have currently is not very good, and by creating the L-shaped area, I think we're much better because we're backing it up against B1 and R4, so it's a lot better deal than it is today.
All the comments that everyone has made as well. You know, we're looking at the zoning, not the potential build out. So the relocation of the R4 to the rear of the property seems to be an improvement.
I agree.
I had a clarifying point too as well. I just wanted to, after listening to the public's opinion on this whole matter and postponing, potentially tabling this, Justin, is in my thought that if we do table this, the petitioner could then pull the request as well and then be left with what is existing today.
Yeah, that's correct. If this were denied or tabled, this petitioner could potentially just say, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to build a 6-acre strip right off of the road here of 3.5-story buildings, and they would be in their right by zoning. So yeah, you are correct. This is this zoning is here. I mean, this Phil made a good point. This potential plan that's laid out before us may be the I hate to say best worst case scenario, but I think from the public's perspective and the comments we heard tonight, you know, no one's happy to have a development here, it sounds like, necessarily yet, but one could happen tomorrow without any public input, and that's because of how it's currently zoned.
Correct. And I think our part as planning commission is to do our due diligence to serve the community, and from hearing from them, I think rather than postponing this and tabling it, we should potentially vote on this tonight.
So I heard something different from the public, and that is that they're okay with, they understand that it's R4 strip there, and they would prefer that it, you know, stay as zoned, you know, that this special request to rezone it is denied. I mean, there seemed to be overwhelming, and I know they were basing their comments on several different iterations, and you know, maybe they weren't all based on the last iteration. Several of them did request that it be postponed so that they could understand it better. I mean, that was kind of them, you know, to not want it just voted down outright. But many others were still in the camp of, you know, not wanting it, just leaving it as is, willing to live with the ramifications. And they did invest in their homes with this understanding, you know, with this zoning in place. They, you know, made their investments, made their plans. You know, now we're changing the risk scenario on them. So if we,
Chad, do you think, Chad, that they were negative about the rezoning that is being requested, or were they negative about the proposed development?
changing the zoning to R4, you know, moving it back.
I felt a lot of their concerns were based on any kind of development that we're going to have, whether it impacts traffic and the school system and all those things are going to happen regardless of the development, even where it is, regardless of where it is. I mean, the subdivision even outside of this community is more impactful to the schools due to transportation and various things than even one that's in the center of town. These are always impactful on where's the fire department going to put a new building, right? I mean, so these governmental entities, we're reactionary, unfortunately, to where development occurs in the community. And we don't lead the way, but we have to react to it. And that's just the way it's always been, unfortunately. But so I heard them say a lot of concerns about just the development in general, not so much about the R4 moving. And I can't envision it being worse by moving it. Now, Chad, you might think that R4 is not going to get developed if we don't move it. And that's kind of where you're at with it.
Right.
So if that's your point, I get it.
That is.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think Steve has been pretty clear that he will develop this regardless. He's just trying to do it with community input.
Exactly, Justin. We are going to develop this property, and we've appreciated we've opened the door for community feedback. We've received it. We've appreciated it. We're taking that into consideration. We understand. We think it's an improvement to use the L-shaped pattern. That's why we've asked for it. So yeah, we're gonna build it either way. But I think everybody prefers the L shape, and that's why we're here right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there are a lot of complaints about the R4 in general. I think moving it is a better solution. I think there are also concerns about the R1 section and maybe the setbacks and how close the houses are, but I feel like that's not even involved in today's discussion. So if we're focusing just on moving the R4, I feel like that makes sense, and it's something that we should consider doing.
Any other comments or thoughts on this? All right, so yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, did anybody read the petition? And it was saying, the whole 20% clause or whatever. And did anybody read that? What was that, Pat? Did you understand that?
Yeah, that's if you're referring to the written protest, that only has bearing on that primarily has bearing on the village board. There's a section in the code about owners of frontage and owners of the frontage filing an objection, and then that triggers a 2/3 vote of the trustees. So in terms of evidentiary value or an effect on the manner in which you conduct your proceeding, it is more geared, that's a step that's geared towards the village approval and not yours.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Steve or comments in general before we make a motion here? Do we have a motion on case number 20-04?
I'll make the motion to approve case number 20-04.
Thank you, Mr. Fick. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ritterbusch. Brad, you may call when ready. Brad, if you're still awake, we can call when ready.
Okay. Fick.
Yes.
Ritterbusch.
Yes.
Smock.
Yes.
Guile.
Yes.
Zobrist.
Yes.
DeWeese.
No.
Farrell.
Yes.
Keach.
Yes.
Knapp.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. And Steve, thank you. And Craig, I think you're long gone, but if you're still here, thank you all for staying on late to handle your petitions. We move on to, well, actually, in this case, do we need to adjourn the public hearing formally, Pat?
No, you'd already concluded the public hearing before
True.
board deliberation starts. So you're fine.
I'm getting delirious. All right, we'll move on to other business, which I certainly hope for the safety of all involved, there is none.
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, so all we need now is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second.
That was thank you. Made and second. All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, thanks everyone. I appreciate the long night.
Doubling back, actually, before everybody goes, we got to roll call that.
I knew that was coming.
Oh, shoot, I forgot. It's the new, yeah, okay, yeah. All right, so go ahead and call when ready, Brad.
Ritterbusch,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Guile,
Yes.
Zobrist,
Yes.
DeWeese,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Keach,
Yes.
Knapp,
Yes.
Fick,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, thank you again, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks.